Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 71 of Through the Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame. The other voice you'll hear, as always, is Matt Feuerstein. We are the people that make Through the Years. You are our listeners, our deep vein thrombosos, our scarred babies, and if you want to know why we call our fans those things occasionally, well, then you haven't listened to every episode and you've got some work to do, because I'm not going to tell you right now, Matt. But
when you said the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor, I've been listening to so much Doughboys lately that I really truly expected you to say the podcast about chain restaurants. And don't you wish that was what we were doing instead?
We could switch into that, although we lost a few years ago here. Where I live was the site of the first Carl's Jr. in Canada, and it was also probably one of the first Carl's Jr. in Canada to go out of business. So. But we could switch over. There's definitely still some options here.
Well, I guess if you wanted it to only be the podcast about Carl's Jr., you'd be out of luck. But
oh yes, definitely.
But there are other chain restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
I know this because I listen to Doughboys. Let's just plug that for today.
Let's just talk about restaurants that used to be in my city that went out of business, like the Sizzler.
Oh, that's fun.
Actually, there was a restaurant. It was for some reason, there was a restaurant growing up where they had a burger called the Nash Chicken Burger. And to this day, I don't know why they called it the Nash Chicken Burger, but every time I ordered it as a kid, you better believe I was thinking about Kevin Nash. And I was like, maybe there's a 1% chance this is named after him.
I'm going to piss off a lot of ROH regulars here and say that the very first cheesesteak I ever had was the one that they advertised on TV from Roy Rogers. I had that a few times, so that'll upset the Philadelphians.
Oh, great! So, if you want to go back and hear, what we're talking about with stuff like Scarred Babies, and believe me, that one is worth going back and hearing because it is the genesis of that is great. I forget which episode it's in, but you know what? They're all great. And so if you're obviously found us, so you found one of our two feeds. You're either listening to us on the Pro Wrestling Only podcast feed, and if so, but you don't like the feed having other shows on, which, maybe you don't like the clutter. Maybe you want easier access to every episode we've ever done. Just search out there, Through the Years. We have our own podcast feed. But if you're listening to the Through the Years feed, know that there's a feed called Pro Wrestling Only with a bunch of other great podcasts. I've been re-listening to some old episodes of Where the Big Boys Play, which is kind of a show, Matt and I were both fans of before this show, which is kind of like this show, a standard wrestling review show, but about early WCW, and that show is still great all these years later. And of course, we have a YouTube. We put the shows up on YouTube, and I think we're up to maybe 2 or 3 people who listen to them on YouTube. So that army is growing by leaps and bounds, Matt, by at least 200-300%. But with that all said, since we're covering a show that happened literally the day after the last show we covered, there was no news to cover that happened at the time between these shows. So we can go right to the show that we are covering today. The Summer of Punk continues, and that means we are covering Escape from New York, which took place July 9th, 2005 at the New Yorker Hotel in New York City in front of a reported crowd of 600 fans. Although, as always, I always go just from the Observer numbers on the crowd estimates, even though we know sometimes, they could be off. But I always just say just be consistent with one. But I will say this was one where there was some fair bit of discrepancy because the Pro Wrestling Torch, I'll just read this quote, Matt. Gabe Sapolsky was said to be visibly happy with the July 9th event, especially with attendance, which was estimated to be between 900 and 1,000 fans who were enthusiastic all night, reacting well to everything. So, in the grand scheme of things, to WWE, 300 fans would be a rounding error. But to Ring of Honor, the difference between 600 fans and 900 to 1,000, that's a fairly big discrepancy. But, Matt, what I really liked about that story is normally the Torch, they get just, on the record quotes from Gabe Sapolsky. I like that this time it was like a third hand or second hand thing where it was Sapolsky was said to be visibly happy with the July 9th event. I like the idea that maybe someone just caught him dancing a jig backstage and called Wade Keller and was like, Gabe is so happy right now. You won't believe it. He's dancing. He's giving out coupons to Carl's Jr. Everything's going our way tonight.
Carl's. I don't think there were any Carl's Jr.'s in New York City at that time.
Well, then they don't know good food.
Yeah. But Yeah, just the idea of someone being, quote, visibly happy. Like, maybe he just smiled once. Hey, it's like, hey, Gabe is smiling. This must mean we have 900 to 1,000 people in attendance tonight. But I was there. I was there, and I don't. I mean, I don't know what but I don't feel. It feels like it was much less packed than it was the next show in the same building. So I don't know. But hey, what do I know?
Yeah, I think the Observer might have actually even said that maybe this crowd was down a little bit from the last show in the building. But yeah. Either way, I guess that opens up one of the things I wanted to ask you, Matt. We've been on this journey together, bros for life, and we've watched, the first 70. We've rewatched the first 71 Ring of Honor shows. I would argue that this might be one of the hottest crowds we've seen yet in the first few years of Ring of Honor. This is like a top 3. This might even be the hottest. I don't know.
You think this crowd was hotter than Manhattan Mayhem?
I'm not sure about that. You know what I will say about this crowd, Matt, is one thing I think was really impressive about this crowd is not only was it loud, but they never burned out. Like, they started loud from the first match, and they were still loud for the main event. Like, and we'll see in the future with Ring of Honor, there will be shows where even when the main events are really good, the shows will be long enough or have so many, like, action-packed matches that the crowd will be kind of, getting visibly tired. And this crowd, like, credit to you and your New York reps, Matt, you guys held through, like, the entire night, I would say.
The New Yorker Hotel was such a special venue. I went to all but one of the shows there. The only show I missed was Manhattan Mayhem. And I went to this show and the other 2 shows that were in that venue. There were only 4 altogether. And I can tell you, like, at least from that moment on, there was not another venue that had the atmosphere of that place. Like, I like, this is the second ROH show I went to. The first one was The Future Is Now. And, it was, that was fun, but it was night and day, the experience, being in that venue and being at the New Yorker Hotel in that crowd. It almost like I remember telling people when I got back, like, about, like, why I was so excited to be there. And I was like, and maybe this is a cornball New York reference, but, like, I was like, it's like being at the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Like, for non-wrestling fans, like, they could sort of get, like, that interactivity aspect of it. You know what I mean? And, yeah. And, like, that's how it felt. It really felt interactive and just so alive. And I was sort of like, man, if this is what ROH is like all the time, this is like the greatest thing ever. It was not what it was like all the time, but it was definitely like it all the time in that building. And
do you take any personal credit for that? Because you started showing up with The Futures Now, and this is your second show. So do you think you had something to do with this, Matt?
No. Not at all. I'm pretty reserved as an audience member, but still am, actually less than I used to be, but definitely still am. But yeah, I don't know what it was. Like, I don't like, because like I said in the last show, a lot of the fans you would see at ROH shows from, like, in different regions, a lot of them are the same people. It's not. Yeah. It's not like it's just a completely different group of people. Like, I estimated,
Green Lantern fan is still in the front row. In a lot of these places.
Yeah, I estimated like 20% of the crowd, like, is the same in the Long Island show and the New York City show. I don't know if that's exactly right, but I think it's a pretty safe estimate. So I guess that other 80% makes such a huge difference in terms of the vibe and stuff because, yeah, or I don't know if it's also the acoustics in the place, and there were shows at the Manhattan Center Grand Ballroom and the Hammerstein that didn't have great reactions, but there was never a show at the New Yorker that didn't.
Yeah, there might be something to that acoustics thing because I was, listening to the other podcast that we reference a lot about Ring of Honor and Honorable Mention, and I know Jeff Schwartz was mentioning how he thought the New Yorker Hotel, there was just something about the way the sound even bounced, around. And for those who haven't seen the shows in the New Yorker Hotel, it's got a balcony. It's a pretty, very tight fit with the ring and the fans. Like, there is something about that I could see, like, the sound feeling like it's just bouncing around right back on top of you. So maybe even that helps a little bit with it. But I would also say just the crowds were really good. The only thing I will say, and some people might be annoyed by this, I did not mind it, but I know when we started doing Through the Years, we were always like, it was very much just cheer and boo crowds, and we were like, when are they going to get really chant heavy? Because there's certainly a time, and there's been slowly more chants in Ring of Honor during this period, as there was in all indie wrestling. But I would say this show, not only were they one of the best crowds, they were also one of the most chant-happy crowds, I think, because they really came up with a lot of different chants. And, I don't think they ever took away from the show, but these were definitely people into coming up with various things to say throughout every match, or a lot of them, and sometimes even, as we'll see, homophobic things. But hey,
although we still have not had our first ROH "This is awesome" chant, have we?
Yeah, I don't think so. We've had Match of the Year chants, I believe.
Well, so that went back to like the very beginning, but
yeah.
But no, no, "This is awesome" chants just yet. I think we'll probably get them by the end of 2005, but I'm not positive about that. But there was one match in particular that I think made this show stand out from a crowd reaction standpoint. I'm curious to see. We'll find out later if you agree with me about which match it was. But I remember it as the match that really solidified my live experience as being like, wow, like this is so cool.
There's a match in my notes where I've written down the story of this match is the crowd. So I think we'll have the same one, but we'll find out as we do the show.
Yes.
And we open the show backstage with Colt Cabana. Colt tells us he's not doing Good Times, Great Memories right now because he's focused on tonight's European rounds match with Nigel McGuinness. At this point, Austin Aries walks in to interrupt mid-promo. Colt says what they had in the past, their feud, it's over. But Aries is like, I just want to know what's going on with CM Punk and the world title. Colt says that's Punk's deal, not Colt's. He just wants to focus on his match tonight. Just leave him out of it. Aries says Colt should concentrate on Punk. Tell Punk to get his head straight and do the right thing. And at this point, Aries leaves. Colt references Spike Lee because of Aries saying do the right thing.
Great movie.
And says they're going to have to reshoot this promo later because he's not in a good mood now.
I wonder how many times that movie's been referenced in wrestling. It's one of my favorite movies. If you have not seen Do the Right Thing, I mean, not that I'm telling people things they don't already know, but if you have not seen Do the Right Thing, you need to turn this podcast off and watch that movie.
That's an excellent movie. And not just an excellent movie. If you want any movie that really gets across the vibe of like a hot, sticky summer in a city, and maybe during the summer you want to escape that with your entertainment, but I mean, it's not just a great movie on a variety of themes and levels, but even just a movie that makes you feel like summer. To me, Do the Right Thing is one of those movies.
And it just thematically holds up so well. Like it almost seems like prescient, like the way that it addresses issues that are, I mean, they're just still so relevant more than 30 years later. Anyway.
Yes, sadly.
Talk about tangents.
From movies that deal with like racial tension to our opening match, the Dixie and the Ring Crew Express of Dun Marcos defeated Lacey's Angels of Cheech and Deranged along with Vordell Walker, and they won their match in 11 minutes. The Dixie and the Ring Crew Express they won in 11 minutes 23 seconds when Marcos pinned Cheech after he hit the senton off of Dunn's shoulders while Dunn was sitting on the top turnbuckle. Matt, what'd you think about this opener? This turns out to be, I believe, Vordell Walker's final Ring of Honor match. So, we have now seen the entire rise, but that wasn't really a rise, and fall of Vordell Walker, which is stunningly quick considering how much kind of hype he initially came in with.
A lot of these guys are pretty much done at this point. I mean, most of them have a few more matches left, but Vordell's done after this match. Deranged has like maybe 2 or 3 more matches in ROH in this run. Dixie also another 1 or 2. Dunn and Marcos even are gone by not too much longer, from 6-7 months later. It's weird. Like these guys are just. It's like the end of an era coming up. But, it's actually interesting watching ROH at this point because there's a lot of new eras all the time. This is the summer of Punk is sort of its own era. The period right after that, the period after, it's just, there's a lot of rebirth, I guess, in this era that we're covering now. But, the first thing I wondered when I watched this, is Vordell Walker a heel in now, or was this just randomness? This is a random pairing. Because he was teaming with Samoa Joe, and Bryan Danielson just a few shows, a few months earlier. A few shows for him because he hadn't been on that many. But I guess they didn't really think it through enough to say whether or not he's a heel, right? It's just this is the team he's on,
Prazak was kind of hinting on commentary that maybe like Lacey's Angels were like trying him out. I believe I wrote down my notes on that. Prazak says at one point in commentary, he says Vordell is grasping at straws here. It's just basically saying he's doing whatever he can to work his way. But he literally uses the phrase grasping at straws, which knowing this was his last match, I was like, oh, that's pretty on the nose.
Yeah, for real. So Lenny Leonard, by the way, is on commentary, and he's actually on commentary for almost the whole show. He only the last couple matches does not feature him on commentary, so he really was thrown in here. And I thought, he had a pretty good showing for himself, wouldn't you say? All in all, for a first show.
I think he's definitely letting Prazak take the lead on just going through the backstories, because he probably, like he said in the current interviews, that like he only had watched like the last 3 months of Ring of Honor DVDs. But no, I think I know he feels his early work in Ring of Honor wasn't good, but I think, it's especially for the standard of Ring of Honor commentary, it's pretty good,
Yeah, I thought he's, already one of the best Ring of Honor commentators by this show. I thought, what was fun about this match was mainly the crowd. Like you said, a really hot crowd. Like this really felt like the hot opener that you want on a show like this. It was lower card guys doing lower card stuff, but it was fun. Especially, I thought the early part of the match, I think, was the most fun part. There was a part early where Marcos is getting the advantage on Cheech, so Cheech tells Marcos to tag in Dixie, and Marcos does it. And I'm just thinking, like, I wouldn't let a heel tell me who to tag. You know what I mean? I'd be like, hey, no, you're the bad guy. I'm not going to do what you want. But but they do, they do a bunch of wackiness. They do this one wacky thing where Dunn and Marcos grab both of Cheech's arms and air guitar them, and then Dixie jumps on Cheech's back and does his own air guitar, and the crowd goes pretty nuts for that. Marcos does this big, long, spinning head scissors on Walker, and the crowd's going nuts for all of it. Cheech even hits a Kenta-style Busaiku knee early in the match. And I'd say, actually, as far as like the way Walker looked, I feel like this is probably one of his better showings. I mean, it's in a in a 6-person tag, like, it's easy to just get in and do what you do well and then get out. But like, he does some cool stuff, like where he picks Dunn up in a wheelbarrow and kicks him in the chest while he's doing it, and then wheelbarrow suplexes him over his head. Like, that's pretty cool. Meanwhile, Deranged is very excited when he gets in, and I don't know if I just didn't notice it on the last show, but it felt like he had gotten a haircut just since the night before. But that's a completely unimportant point. He, 2 nights in a row, he does his big running head full of steam chin lock, but the crowd, I think, popped even more for this chin lock than the night before's crowd. They even did like a holy shit chant for his chin lock, so that's always fun. But they keep going in this mode, doing their fun spots. I say once we get to Prazak and Leonard, we don't really have as many funny commentary quotes, but you get the occasional one. I guess every commentator has them. Like at one point, Prazak says, Vordell is, quote, quite possibly the most powerful man in this matchup. And I was like, quite possibly? Like, who would even be the competition for that? Like, I guess Dixie? I don't know. Dunn? Who would be the second most powerful person in the match?
Cheech? I don't know.
Yeah, but quite possibly it's Vordell Walker. So they go through their stuff. Dunn hits a big elbow on Vordell, so he's gotten beat on for a while, and the crowd chants big time for the hot tag. But this is where the match starts to be like kind of not as good. Like, instead of going for the hot tag at that point, Dunn just picks up Vordell and chops him. And so Vordell gets to just do more offense, even though, like, at that moment, the crowd was really, like, raring for a hot tag. So Dunn continues to get beaten on, and he eventually whips out a last ride powerbomb on Derange, which, I don't know, I don't think he does that move so often. I was pretty surprised by that. And then he tags in Marcos, and I feel like it was a pretty wasted hot tag because, like, the moment was too late, and Dunn did it kind of nonchalantly. So Marcos tagged in like he had been hot tagged, but the way the tag was gotten to was not that hot. I don't know if that makes sense. But, he does his house full of fire. They do the assisted sliced bread on Vordell. Lacey's Angels do the Doomsday Ace Crusher on Marcos. Dixie comes in, does a bunch of big moves, and Vordell cuts him off with his swinging Uranagi thing, but the Ring Crew Express break that up. And
the Vortex.
Yes, that's right. And even Lenny Leonard says he doesn't know who the legal man is anymore, and I don't think anyone does. So the match is like kind of messy at this point, and Marcos, he head scissors Cheech into the turnbuckle. Then the Ring Crew Express hit the assisted senton onto Cheech off the top rope for the win. I thought this match was a lot of fun. I thought the early part especially, I feel like the final segment broke down a bit more than you like, but the crowd was so hot that it carried it, I think, I think the crowd carried it to seeming like a better match than it was. But it was still fun, is what I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I thought this was, a good 3-star little fun opener. I feel like we've seen a couple openers recently in Ring of Honor where they were kind of maybe a little more reserved kind of openers, the kind of opener where they're decent fun matches, but they're not super exciting necessarily. They're more just well-constructed, kind of more mild-mannered second gear matches. And this was more of, that's one good way to open a show, but this is another way, which is, more of, it wasn't quite as crazy as your average scramble or crazy spot fest. They adhered to tags most of the way through the match, but it was still a lot of the guys you would see in those kind of scrambles, doing a lot of just, no real story, a bunch of action. And I was going to ask you, so I'm glad you said, I was going to ask you, did you think this is one of Vordell's best performances in Ring of Honor? So I'm glad you said that, because I agree with you. Not that there's a ton of stiff competition there. And I also think where Vordell benefited here is he got what I think is a plum role in a match.
Gets to be a base a little bit.
Yeah, I think a really, not necessarily, I mean, I don't want to, wrestling is tough, but I think a relatively easy, simple role that's really, I've seen a lot of guys, knock them dead with, is when you're in a match with a bunch of smaller, more flippy-do guys, and you're the one guy that either is known for being a bit bigger or stronger or have stiff offense.
Quite possibly and, the most powerful person in the whole match.
It may be Matt. We're not sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like Vordell, he really got to stand out being the one guy here who's throwing stiff kicks, and he does the rolling Germans and even that vortex, which is supposed to be his finisher, that spinning Uranagi slam. And I was also going to ask you, is that the first time he's gotten to do his finisher? Did he only get to do his finisher in Ring of Honor in literally his final Ring of Honor match? In fact, I think that's the first time we've ever heard the name of it, which Lenny knows because Lenny's been calling FIP, which Vordell's been having, I think, getting more competitive matches in.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing it before. I mean, we could certainly be wrong about that, but I don't remember personally seeing it in ROH before.
But yeah, so it's always one of those sad things when a guy's on his way out of Ring of Honor and they then actually have a better performance than they've been having than the ones that they've been having that probably got them losing their job. Not that Xavier had some good matches, even with the Paul London matches, but I remember even the final few matches of Xavier or guys like that where we'd go, oh man, he's actually having some fairly good performances now, but we know that now it's already kind of over for him. And I didn't feel it was quite on that level, but it was this is probably Vordell Walker's best performance.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably his best, but it's not like it was wow, he turned heads with this. You know what I mean?
No,
it was it was a solid little deal.
Yeah. I also thought, Dixie isn't in this very much. He's in a bit at the start and a bit at the end, but I actually thought he looked fairly good. Another guy who's on his way out. I really like that where he does the fist drop off the top, but he kind of rotates, kind of starts it with almost his back turned, and then he's rotating on the way down. I thought that was really cool on a top rope fist drop. And also I noticed on the entrance, the same girl from the previous night who tried to hand Lacey money, like she was a stripper or something, and Lacey throws it at her. She's there again. She does the spot again. Good work. She made the double shot. Now you were wondering how many people went to both shows. That woman definitely made both shows.
What a team those two are, Lacey and that fan. But yeah, you're talking about Dixie being on his way out, but literally all of them are just pretty much on their way out.
Yeah, we're getting a real. I mean, it's the end of an era, in a way, because really the era of the Special K guys and is going away, and also the era of, the Ring Crew Express Outcast Killers. We just saw the end of the Outcast Killers basically on the last show, on the main shows.
Yeah.
And,
and the next match, we're going to see another team that is not long for ROH.
Exactly. But with this being Vordell Walker's last appearance in Ring of Honor, I thought I'd bring up something because it's related to the show, and I'll explain more how it's related to a little bit later. But first, I'll give you one example how it's related to the show, which is right off the bat. Let me just see if I put my quote down here. Okay. The Observer wrote, during the New York show, when Vordell Walker came out, fans were barking like Rick Steiner, which was meant as a positive and not as a taunt, since Walker gets the same reaction at some shows in Florida. So I didn't hear this on the show. I mean, maybe this was just, not audible or not in what was the footage that was there. But for those who don't know, Matt, do you remember the Vordell Walker Rick Steiner situation?
No.
Okay. So Vordell Walker, he isn't, I don't mean to put the guy down, because from what I've heard from people that still watch, he's actually a fairly good wrestler. He's still wrestling, I believe, on the indies to this day. For various reasons, his Ring of Honor run did not work out. But if you ever look up Vordell Walker, by and large, he's known for two things. One, this Ring of Honor run that didn't work out. But most importantly, he's known for an incident he had with Rick Steiner right before the show. And Matt, I did some research. I found a MikeMooneyham.com article on this, and I'm only using part of the article, and there will be a Ring of Honor payoff to the end of this as well. But I want to explain why people were chanting Rick Steiner at this guy. And this is probably, in some ways, this might be the thing that Vordell Walker is most known for, when you do Google searches and stuff. So I'll just start reading this bit of the article. Vordell Walker doesn't like bullies, and he's nobody's whipping boy. Rick Steiner, one of pro wrestling's resident bullies, found those facts out the hard way when he allegedly took liberties in the ring with the 24-year-old Walker at a recent independent show in Ocala, Florida. The two grapplers were on different sides of a tag team match, pitting Walker and Dustin Rhodes against Steiner and Eric Stevens. Now, Matt, before I read this next part, I just want to say I love these next 2 or 3 sentences I'm going to read. You know how sometimes people do the machine learning algorithms will be like, hey, we fed this computer, 30,000 songs worth of lyrics, and then we asked it to write a song. And isn't it weird that it kind of works and it kind of doesn't? The paragraph I'm going to read you next, Matt, is so generic pro wrestling and its purest form. This to me is like if you fed a computer millions of wrestling shows and said, make up a wrestling show. Because listen to this card that this match was on. The Southeast Championship Wrestling event, billed as, quote, Day of the Legends, and held in conjunction with a Marshall Tucker Band concert, drew nearly 2,000 fans and featured Dusty Rhodes against Jerry Lawler in the headliner, along with a contest billed as the final bout for the Rock and Roll Express. To me, Matt, that's just wrestling. You got it all, Matt. 2,000 fans, so it's outdrawed every Ring of Honor show so far. It features the Marshall Tucker Band. You've got 2 veterans teaming up with 2 indie guys in Eric Stevens and Vordell Walker. You've got Jerry Lawler and Dusty Rhodes still wrestling in 2005 in a headline match. Again, drawing more than pretty much any indie at the time. And most of all, you've got the final match of the Rock and Roll Express, who are still wrestling 16 years later.
Yes.
To me, that is amazing.
The last part is the best part, because it's just one of those classic bullshit last matches, And I wonder if the Rock and Roll Express thought that was going to be their last match when they said so. You never know. Every once in a while, the answer is yes. Every once in a while, the answer is no.
If someone had said, this obviously won't be their last match and they'll be wrestling in 2020, I'd be like, you know what? Yeah, I can believe that. If they were like, and you know what one of their matches is going to be in 2020? They're going to be wrestling in New Japan, in America, teaming with Hiroshi Tanahashi. I'd be like, what the fuck? And that was the selling point of that show.
I was at that show.
Oh my God, you were? I forgot. Holy shit.
At the one at the Hammerstein. Yeah. And, and they did their stereo dives in 2019. They did that, yes.
When Matt's at a wrestling show, big things happen. I think that's the lesson of tonight's episode. But going back to the Mike Mooneyham article, But the match that had most fans talking after the show involved Walker, a relatively unheralded but rising star who has drawn strong reviews for his work in Ring of Honor and TNA. Okay, Mike, you're stretching it a bit here. And surly veteran Steiner, who at one time was one of WCW's top acts with Brother Scott and financially benefited from a near seven-figure contract doled out by close friend and company president Eric Bischoff. According to numerous first-hand reports, Steiner shot on Walker during their first contact in the ring and delivered a stiff kick to his face, busting open the lip of the 4-year pro Walker. Not sensing any line of communication with his opponent, he retaliated with some shoot kicks of his own, a guillotine chokehold, and an assortment of moves from which Steiner had trouble escaping. Quote, I spit up some blood and I knew this guy was trying to really fight me, said Walker. That's when I charged him and backed him up against the ropes, hooked him and got him in a takedown and started wrestling him. Walker said he worked a series of chokes on Steiner but would always let him go. I wasn't really trying to pound this guy. I was just trying to get him to chill out. I got control of him numerous times, and finally I got his back and started working the chokes in just to let him know we could wrestle or continue to fight. Rhodes helped break up the first exchange by asking Walker to tag out. Walker said there was no fighting between Steiner and Rhodes. Later in the match, however, the 41-year-old Steiner attempted to powerbomb Walker from the ring apron through a table. Walker, fearing what Steiner might have in mind, refused to go up for the move. Hell no, I said. That's okay. I'm going to let you do that to somebody else, said Walker. At that point, he says, a frustrated Steiner began cursing, claiming Walker, quote, couldn't work, unquote, and motioned for Walker to tag Rhodes back in. Steiner and Rhodes battled to the back and into the concession area, leaving Walker and Stevens in the ring, clueless as to how to salvage the disjointed match. Walker says that's when he decided to confront Steiner and challenge him to a fight, if that's what he preferred, with Steiner reportedly cursing and walking away from any further damage. I took my gloves off, ran to the back, threw some fans, and shoved Steiner off a table, said Walker. Listen, if you want to finish this right now, let's go on and fight and do it right now, Walker said. He told Steiner. This is me and you right now. He cursed back at me and called me a few names. He and Dustin officially fought off, said Walker. Although Rhodes pinned Steiner after a chair shot for the finish, Steiner broke from the script and held up his opponent's hand in the air after the match, soliciting an uneasy ovation from the crowd. It ruined the show for a lot of fans who knew what was going on. I tried my best to save the match when it was Eric and me in the ring, but for the most part it was ruined from the get-go, said Walker. So this was the thing. It was kind of the talk of, like, not a huge talk, but kind of the talk of, like, wrestling message boards for a week or two at the time. So, Matt, where it all comes full circle in doing my research for the show, going back to The Observer, I couldn't believe this part right here. Dave wrote in The Observer, quote, Gabe Sapolsky did try and put together a Vordell Walker versus Rick Steiner match together, but Steiner said he didn't want to give Walker the credibility after how he publicly described the incident. Walker isn't exactly knocking them dead here, Dave finishes the article with. So, man, I thought this was pretty crazy that, one, Gabe, like, was trying to book Rick Steiner for a Ring of Honor match, and two, like, to me, doesn't that seem like the actions of a booker that's, like, still trying to get this guy over?
Are you sure that he was trying to book it for ROH, or could it have been for FIP?
I guess you're right. Although, you know what, Matt? I think when I looked up Cage Match, when I was researching this, I think Vordell's done an FIP too.
Oh, wow.
So it is kind of weird to me that, like, Gabe was trying to book a match for a guy that essentially, like, maybe he thought that was his last shot at getting Vordell over, maybe, was just trying to play off of the Rick Steiner controversy. But
this is also not too long after the whole Daniel Puder, Kurt Angle thing that got, Puder to be almost pushed in WWE before all the veterans were like, yeah, we're going to destroy Daniel Puder. So there's some similarities between those two stories. But yeah, the most surprising thing to me about that whole story was actually the fact that Walker just felt so comfortable talking about it to Mike Mooneyham, just so openly.
And again, like I was saying, this is something he became known for because he would talk about this in a few interviews at the time. And I'll say this, if you guys just search like Vordell Walker, Rick Steiner, this column comes up. I didn't read like half of the article because he goes through into like trying to talk to Rick Steiner backstage and all this stuff. But again, this is just Vordell Walker's side of the story. I believe Raven, I did not look this up. I do not do this much research, but I believe I heard somewhere in one of the Secret of the Ring shoots Raven did for Ring of Honor, he kind of shits on Vordell Walker for this incident and defends Rick Steiner. But from all the stories I've heard, it seems people seem to believe Vordell's version, and also that Rick apparently maybe does have some of a reputation at the time for maybe taking liberties with young guys in matches, and Vordell happened to be one of the few guys he took liberties with who had a real shoot fighting training background, who decided, I'm not going to put up with this, and turned into this whole thing. But that brings us to the second match of the show, which we did not see. It did not make on the DVD because, much like the last show, this had an appearance from Matt Stryker, not the one with the eyebrows, the teacher who became the play-by-play announcer. But there was a match on the show that we do not see. Matt Stryker defeated Mike Cruel. The Observer wrote about this. Stryker got a huge reaction based on all his publicity. Fans cheered him, as there's something noble to the cause, I guess, of lying on the job and calling in sick to do indie dates. Fans chanted things like, "You got screwed," and social studies at him. Stryker beat Cruel in a decent match with great reactions. Fans chanted, "Please come back" at Stryker. Matt, do you have any, I mean, it's a lot to ask. It's 16 years ago. Do you have any memories of Matt Stryker versus Mike Cruel?
Yeah, I mean, I remember thinking it was fun. Like, I remember thinking like that, like Stryker definitely was very over, and I have to admit that at the time, as a young man, I was on Stryker's side in that whole thing. It sounds really bad now, but like at the time I was like, yeah, cool, you know, he's following his dream, so what? He takes some days off from work. But like that is how, so I think that's probably how most of the crowd thought about it. And yeah, he was really over. He did some cool stuff in the match. It wasn't like this big, long back and forth match, but it was totally over. And yeah, I wish I could see the match again to see if it held up. But like, I remember it being good and fun. And I remember Matt Stryker making a good impression. So I don't remember too many of the details. I remember there was this one move that he did where like he got into this weird leg grapevine where like both guys were sort of upside down. And then Stryker would like slap Cruel repeatedly in the face. Like, I don't know, probably if you saw a lot of Matt Stryker matches, maybe that's one of his signature spots. I don't know, but that got a big pop. As far as actual moves in the match, that's pretty much the only one I remember. But I do remember it being fun and got over pretty well.
And if people are wondering why Matt Stryker was getting chance of like social studies and stuff, we go on to the previous episode because we talk about Matt Stryker there and go through why he kind of had this weird breakout 15 minutes of fame for basically being a teacher who took sick days to work wrestling shows and got caught and fired. But
Yep.
We join Colt Cabana again backstage where he's ready to do take two of his promo. He starts the same promo he did earlier in the night when Samoa Joe interrupts this time, asking Colt what's up with his boy Punk. Colt again says he doesn't know. He's not taking the plunge for this one, he says, which is a fun choice of language, the plunge, knowing that's Punk's finisher. Joe says if Colt stays on Punk's side, he probably will be taking the plunge for this one. Colt says he's over it. And Colt just walks away. He says he's not doing a promo anymore. He's just pissed off. So
that reminds me of the end of an "I Think You Should Leave" sketch, where he's just like, whatever, chuck it, I'm done, forget it. Like that's a very common way that they end some of those sketches.
But yeah, so we're just continuing the storyline here of everyone's basically, Colt's still a face while Punk's a heel, and everyone's basically badgering Colt, being like, what's up with Punk? And Colt's basically having to deal with all of Punk's shit, all the fallout from this. But
still disappointing that Colt kind of had to, he was going away at this point to UK, so he misses a lot of the storyline, because it would have been fun to see how that develops. I know it's really nobody's fault, but I feel like this was an interesting angle where everyone's mad at Cabana for what Punk is doing, and Cabana's trying to distance himself. But he doesn't really come back until Punk's pretty much done with the angle.
Yeah, I believe he misses the next two shows, I think, because he goes on the UK tour for a month. So that brings us to the second match on the DVD, third match on the show. The Ring of Honor Tag Title match, the Carnage Crew of Loc and DeVito defeated BJ Whitmer and Jimmy Jacobs in 14 minutes, 11 seconds when DeVito pinned Jacobs after hitting the second rope spike piledriver. So yes, in fact, this was a title change, a shocking upset title change. The Carnage Crew win the titles from Whitmer and Jacobs. I would say from BJ and Jimmy's end watching this match, this felt like just a pretty standard middle-of-the-road performance from them. And they didn't even do probably as many of their bigger high spots as they would normally do. But from the Carnage Crew's perspective, I think watching them, you could definitely tell this was like, they knew this was probably one of the biggest matches of their careers. I felt like they did pretty much as they could. The only big move of theirs that they didn't do was the Carnage Plex. They did they did not only the second rope spike pile driver, they just did a regular spike pile driver, which they had BJ kick out of for a big near fall. DeVito did his big fat guy standing drop kick, which is always cool, which he doesn't do, on every show. And then on top of that, then later they do the Doomsday Device variation where Loke gets a guy on his shoulders, and then DeVito does the same drop kick from the top rope, which is even cooler. And I just felt like they were working hard. They did a little bit of crowd. This is mostly a pretty straight up wrestling match. It's not like a Carnage Crew plunder brawl, although they do brawl a little bit on the outside, and BJ Whitmer takes a suplex on the metal ramp, and there's a big table break bump near the end where BJ's standing on the top rope, and he gets shoved off and he falls through the ringside timekeeper's table, and that's what takes him out of the match. But I would say this was I would call it a pretty standard undercard tag, but those few big spots I just described, I would probably raise it up again to maybe a 3-star special. And the crowd I do think was legit surprised. I think this is a note I have for a later show, but I think Gabe has said that his reasoning for having the Carnage Crew win the tag titles here was basically he just thought that people didn't believe that BJ I guess he felt that basically the tag title scene had gotten kind of stale, and maybe people didn't think that they could lose in a match like this, so he had them he changed the titles. And it's funny because you could say, Whitmer and Jacobs hadn't held the titles for very long, but when I think about everyone they beat, they had kind of already run the table, Matt, because they had beaten Lacey's Angels, they had beaten Dunn and Marcos, they had beaten the Second City States, not of Colt and Punk, but of Ace Steel and Punk, and they had pinned, actually Punk took the fall in that one. They had beaten Samoa Joe and Jay Lethal to win the titles. They had beaten Roderick Strong and Jack Evans. If they had also beaten the Carnage Crew, they had kind of cleared out a lot of the available even makeshift teams. I mean, they could have kept throwing teams together. So in that sense, I could kind of see why you're saying, well, we kind of have to freshen this up somehow, even though the Carnage Crew will not be holding these titles for very long. But what did you think about all this?
Yeah, and it kind of doubles as a thank you to the Carnage Crew, right? Which I guess we'll talk about more when they have their rematch. But yeah, this match, it certainly wasn't a great match, but I think it was better than I would have expected. Just if I saw this pairing, I don't know. Would you agree with that? That the match was better than you would think this particular matchup would be?
I thought it was maybe about what I feel like the bigger spots in this were bigger than I thought I would have seen from a match like this, because again, I felt like the Carnage Crew were really trying hard to pull out everything because, hey, this was their moment,
Yeah.
This is their match.
Yeah, so there is a story, which is at the beginning of the match, the Carnage Crew tries to wrestle. And in fact, at one point, DeVito is doing an arm wringer on BJ Whitmer and yelling, "I'm a wrestler, goddammit," at the crowd. And the crowd reacts with a holy shit chant for the arm wringer and the yelling. It doesn't take long for it to turn into more of a brawl. Certainly not a Carnage Crew plunder brawl, like you said, but they throw him to the outside. They're clearing off tables. You know what I mean? They kind of make Whitmer and Jacobs wrestle their match. So that leads them to winning, which I think is a solid way to tell the story. There's also a I don't know, quote unquote fun spot where Loke grabs Jimmy Jacobs' arm and yells "New York City," and then uses Jacobs' arm to pantomime Jimmy jerking him off, which I think they stole that spot from Misawa and Kobashi versus Kawada and Taue match. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, that's a classic spot.
Yeah, but who's doing what?
Well, Taue's got the arms to do the jerk off. He's so lanky. I mean, those arms are made to do a jerk off spot, man.
Good. But yeah, there was also a line from Leonard that I thought was funny because he describes Whitmer versus DeVito as the wrestler versus the brawler, which, I guess is true, but it's also kind of funny considering Whitmer's most famous matches in ROH by far are these big-time brawling matches, the ones that he's already had and the ones still to come. Because, if you think of Whitmer's most famous matches, you have the one from Death Before Dishonor 2004 with the Second City Saints. You have the ROH versus CZW stuff, the Cage of Death, the barbed wire match with Necro Butcher. You have the cage match with Jimmy Jacobs, the tables match with Brent Albright. So it's not like Whitmer is not a brawler, but in fact, his brawls are probably more famous than the Carnage Crew's brawls. But I know I'm spending a lot of time on a throwaway line. But yeah, I don't know. I thought the story was okay. The match ended up being okay. And again, the crowd, I think, elevated it. You know what I mean? Like it made the match seem better. They were excited for it, which I bet in most venues this particular match would not get that much of a reaction until the ending. But instead they make it feel like it's a big tag team title match. So good for them. The match was okay. Like I said, better than I expected, and it certainly was an upset finish. You can't say, especially being there live, you cannot say that anyone saw this one coming. So I guess if you value that, you get that. And the crowd reacted aptly for that sort of finish.
Yeah, the crowd definitely gave we're shocked. And, I think some people popped. And I did hear a few people chant bullshit because I think the Carnage Crew were an act that always had at least a few detractors in Ring of Honor because they didn't really look or work like the rest of the roster. Dave wrote in his notes from this show in The Observer, he wrote, crowd didn't see crew as worthy champions and were surprised at the switch. Well, so was I. I mean, again, it was surprising. I don't know if the crowd, this isn't like the crowd does not turn on this. I mean, again, you hear maybe a few people are dissatisfied, but there's also people cheering. And,
there's definitely a pop. Yeah, there's a pop for sure.
Yeah. So I don't know how you get crowd didn't see them as worthy champions.
Well, it's like Dave just has to go by what any random person who sends in a report says. Like when I sent him incorrect information that he published many years ago. By mistake, not on purpose.
So, yeah, you're not sabotaging him, just to be clear. Next up, we have the Ring of Honor Pure Title #1 contendership 4-corner survival match. Jimmy Rave defeated Alex Shelley, Azrael, and James Gibson in 22 minutes and 9 seconds when he pinned Azrael after he hit the Rave Clash. So before the match starts, right after the match starts, technically, just as the bell rings for the match to start. And by the way, this is Roderick Strong was originally in Alex Shelley's spot. Why that's going to change, you're about to find out. Because right when the match starts, the lights go out. Soon a spotlight turns on to show that CM Punk is in the balcony, mic in hand, wearing dress clothes. And Punk says, "Let's go, Gibson," just patronizing him as the crowd cheers and jeers him in equal measure at this point. Punk says he fully intended to challenge the winner of this 4-corner match for a title shot tonight. But since Gibson stuck his nose in Punk's business last night, not once, but twice, he doesn't feel like giving him a shot. We get a CM pussy chant at this point. And then Punk points out that Gibson's win-loss record lately isn't great and calls him a loser. He mocks Gibson as a Coors-drinking, four-wheeler riding, varmint-hunting hick. The crowd at this point starts chanting, "Shut the fuck up" at Punk. Punk says Gibson will never be Ring of Honor champion and goes on to say that, well, Jimmy Rave and Azrael are great competitors. Tonight he has his eyes set on Roderick Strong. He points out that just weeks ago he called Strong the future of Ring of Honor in this very building. But back then when he did that, the crowd chanted, "Please don't go" at Punk, and even thanked him with tears in their eyes. Punk says, "I'm not done with Strong. I'm going to beat some respect into you tonight." At this point, Punk kind of stumbles over a couple of words and the crowd gets off and starts chanting, "You fucked up." Punk just waits it out and then says, tonight, Strong goes one-on-one with him again, except this time it's a non-title match. And the crowd boos this until Mick Foley appears from behind Punk. Foley soon is choking Punk over the second floor balcony, and he gets the mic. He threatens to throw Punk over the balcony, saying that when he hears the words non-title match, he feels like splitting a skull wide open. Foley says Punk should ask himself one simple question: do I feel lucky? Well, do ya, Punk? And you had to know Foley was just planning that line in his head for at least 24 hours. I was
going to say at least like 2. I was going to say like at least a year when he first came to ROH, probably.
So a panicked CM Punk agrees to make tonight's match for the title. Foley tells him to have a nice day, and he releases the choke. So back in the ring, James Gibson's really intense at this point. He's just yelling encouragement to Strong to go to the back, get ready, beat that guy, take the title back. He sends him to the back to prepare. And Rave then at this point jumps Gibson from behind to start the match. And within the first minute, I would say, of the match, Alex Shelley walks to the ring. He jumps on the apron. He officially enters the match, gets a big chant for showing up. And that brings us to the match itself, Matt. So, Matt, what do you think? We've seen a bunch of, a few. Feels like James Gibson's done a million four corners matches lately. It's probably only been 2 or 3, but another 4-corner match with James Gibson and another match that he does not win. What did you think about this?
Well, I'll talk about the promo first, which is to say, the night before, CM Punk gave these amazing promos, just super memorable. This promo he was certainly good, and he got the point across, and the Foley thing was fun, but I would say it's not even close to what we saw the night before in terms of quality or memorability. I don't know if you agree with that. It's much more forgettable than those promos.
The first night was telling a story. This night is just setting up a match for the main event.
Exactly. The story is already told. The other thing I really didn't like about this promo, nothing that Punk did, it was the editing or the camera decisions or whatever it was. So Punk was standing there in the balcony talking to James Gibson, talking to Roderick Strong, and you would think they would cut to those two guys reacting in the ring, but instead they just fixed the camera on Punk the entire time when there was all these reactions going on, and I thought that really took away from things. I wanted to see reaction shots, and you didn't get any. And it seems like a small thing, but to me, it really hurt the vibe of the promo. I remember being there live, and you watched both. You watch Punk in the balcony, you look down at the wrestlers in the ring, especially Gibson. He was very animated. And actually, when the promo finally is over, and you cut back to the ring, Gibson is basically in Strong's face, giving him this really angry pep talk. You go kick his ass, you take that title. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
Gibson, seeing more of Gibson reacting would have made the promo better. So I thought the presentation of that promo was kind of disappointing. I also thought the match was not really my thing. These 4 ways are hit and miss. That I liked the last one from the Sign of Dishonor way more than you did. And, I would expect that I'm probably lower on this one than you. The wrestling was fine. I just thought it was too long and non-dynamic. You still get a lot of Nana dragging Chung by the hair, so that they continue that whole storyline. And they don't really move it forward, but they just continue to put some focus on it. We get another one of those cutaways to Matt Hardy's eyes. But this time it didn't seem like an editing trick. It just seemed like they needed to put it in there somewhere. It seemed like when they got back to the match, they had not edited a bunch of the match out. I kind of wish they would have, not because the match was bad, but because it was just too long. Because they were slowly doing working over Azrael. What it really kind of came down to was Rave and Shelley kind of turned into a makeshift tag team. Shelley was a babyface in this match. When he appeared on the apron, he got a huge reaction. He milked the crowd a little bit, but the way they worked the match, first of all, I did think that Shelley looked the best. I think he did a lot of cool stuff, but they ended up basically working a tag team style match where it was Rave and Shelley against Azrael and Gibson, where Azrael was the guy who was the face in peril. And they worked over his midsection for a while, real slowly. And Azrael would try to make comebacks, and Gibson would break it up. And, Rave and Shelley did a double team suplex where they dropped Azrael's stomach over the top rope and then knocked Gibson off the apron like you would do in a tag team match. And eventually, Gibson... the way they get to the quote hot tag is actually pretty cool, because Rave and Shelley work on Azrael some more, and then all of a sudden Gibson he's like, I've had enough. He jumps into the ring, attacks both of them, throws Azrael into his corner and tags himself in, and the crowd pops big for that. And Gibson, he goes crazy, hits a neck breaker. Gibson moves when Shelley tries to elbow him, and Shelley elbows Rave and drop kicks Shelley. Gibson hits a really, really nice top rope superplex, and then he goes right into the front guillotine choke on Rave. And Shelley breaks that up, so Azrael kicks him out of the ring and does a flip dive onto him. And then Rave and Gibson are trading strikes. Rave hits the gonorrhea, gets a 2 count. Rave goes to the Rave Clash, but Azrael comes in with a springboard dropkick to break it up. Azrael tags himself back in, does his kick combo on Rave, which was much better than the one on the night before. If you were listening to our Sign of Dishonor show, you might remember that I said that Azrael's kick combo did not look very good. This one was much better. They do a few more, back and forth spots. Eventually, Rave gets a roll up on Azrael. And then Azrael tries to roll through himself, but Rave turns it into the Rave Clash and gets the win all of a sudden. I just didn't think it was very exciting. I thought it maybe 5 minutes, 6 minutes shorter would have been better. The storyline with Shelley and Rave will pay off in a few shows. So it was setting something up, but this was not one of my favorite four-ways. You mentioned some homophobic chants. There was a chant at Jimmy Rave's direction that says Jimmy likes balls, and then a Jimmy swallows chant. So a bunch of homophobia in this match, but maybe they meant he likes basketballs and he swallows his vegetables that his mom makes him eat. I don't know. This match was not my thing. I'd say my least favorite match of the show so far, even though technically it was probably the best match of the show so far. I thought it was the least entertaining.
I agree. This is my least favorite match of the show so far. I wouldn't say it's much worse than the last two matches because there's some real, there's some good technically proficient wrestling here. But yeah, it's just too long and there's just too much downtime. And you missed the worst Jimmy Rave chant. There was also literally a musical homophobic chant, Matt, where the crowd at one point goes, "Jimmy sucks a lot of dick, oh the doodah day." And I was like, I'd be impressed if it wasn't homophobic because I was like, you're getting inventive here, but
yeah, the ECW would do stuff like that too. The Camptown Races style chants, yeah.
So, yeah, like you said, this match, people who have listened to the show a long time know that, occasionally I like a four-way, but a lot of them I feel I don't like. And one of the sins or one of the ways a four-way can kind of go wrong to me is something that happens in this match, which you already mentioned, which is the guys just decide to work it like a tag match rather than a four-way. Because remember, all Ring of Honor four-ways, with rare exceptions, were first fall wins it, every man for themselves. So a tag match is all about you beating a guy up, the guy getting no offense back, and you tagging in and out with a partner taking turns beating him up. Now, in a tag match, that makes perfect sense because you're both on the same side. If one of you wins, you both win. But in this match, Azrael, for like a big chunk of the match, is just getting beat up, beat to crap, making no comebacks. And Shelley and Rave keep tagging in and out, working together, and the psychology makes no sense. So I was getting really annoyed. And then I remembered this is actually kind of smartly, and for Ring of Honor standards, somewhat subtly hinting at a future development that happens in a couple shows where, at one point, pardon me, Dave Prezak on commentary even asks, like, why is Alex Shelley working so much with Jimmy Rave in this match? And I liked it because he said that once, but then they never belabored that point, which, again, for Ring of Honor is like rare. Like, if this was, we don't hate Gabe's commentary as much as a lot of people, but if that was Gabe on commentary, it would have been, why is Alex Shelley helping Jimmy Rave? There's no way those two could ever join up and form a team together. Like, he would have just, gone so far in the opposite direction, it would have become obvious. Where with Prezak, it's one little offhand, like, that's weird, and then he just leaves it at that. And, I felt this match was pretty boring until the last third, until the hot tag you described where James Gibson comes in. And from there, I thought the match got more exciting. In the first two thirds, Rave and Shelley, they do a decent job of working over Azrael's midsection, tossing, like even with Rave grabbing like a leg and an arm and just yanking him into the ring post and throw him over the turnbuckles and stuff like that. But it was also kind of boring at the same time, but the final third does get more exciting. Azrael gets to do a couple big dives, and it's just good action, I would say, in the final third. So the final third salvages, I think, the match somewhat, but I also felt kind of bad for Azrael watching this match because, like you described, the big thing about getting beat down in a match is you get to make the hot tag and you get to make a little comeback. And Azrael doesn't even get to make the comeback because basically James Gibson makes the comeback for him. Because like you described, Gibson finally just gets pissed off. He runs in the ring, beats up Rave and Shelley, beals Azrael from one corner of the ring to his corner, walks back over the ropes, tags himself in, and then starts the hot tag where I was like, poor Azrael spends most of the match getting beat up, and then he doesn't even get to make his own comeback.
I felt bad for Azrael, but a really cool spot for Gibson.
Yeah, it was simultaneously the coolest part of the match, and also something I felt bad for one of the guys for. But yeah, so I kind of got weird mixed feelings on this match, but it all adds up, I think, to having basically the same feelings as you. The thing I want to ask you, Matt, is I feel like I've done this probably 4 or 5 times where I am so trigger happy on this, where I keep going, oh, that was the first roll of toilet paper ever thrown at Jimmy Rave. I've said this probably 4 shows. Each time you correctly point out, no, I think that was just a white streamer. That was just a pink streamer. Matt, I really do think Green Lantern fan threw a roll of toilet paper into the ring for this match. Am I wrong? I keep saying it's the first time, and you keep then thinking, oh, it can't. It's not. I think it was a roll of toilet paper. I'm not sure, but I think it was.
I will go back and look right now because I don't remember seeing it, but I'm not going to say that you're wrong. I might have just missed it. Was it at the beginning? It was at the beginning. It was during his entrance?
Yeah, I believe so. And he throws it back out. Like, he gets angry. He grabs it and he throws it back out.
Well, he does do that with the streamers. He's been doing that all along, throwing back out. Like, the streamers thing, like, led to the toilet paper thing. Like, that was the streamers was the gimmick first. Like, people would throw streamers at him, and, like, whereas normally people would react positively to streamers, Rave would react negatively and throw them back. And then eventually he did a promo where it's like, don't throw toilet paper at me. And then suddenly people would throw toilet paper. Yeah. So I am, I'm looking right now. And, I could not tell what that was. I don't think it was toilet paper, but I could be wrong, I guess is what I would say.
Damn it. I will find sooner or later there will be toilet paper, Matt. There will be toilet paper. But
you don't believe me. Rave does a promo that basically tells late in 2005, telling the fans not to bring in toilet paper, and that's when they start bringing in the toilet paper.
But isn't there toilet paper thrown at least once before that? Like, that's him encouraging it once it starts because he knows that's going to be a great thing for his character. I think it happens before that promo at least once, doesn't it?
I don't remember, but it is possible.
We'll see. I mean, maybe someone someone with a better memory than us can write it in ThROH@gmail.com, or we give all the contact information at the end of the show, but we'll find out eventually.
But I just want to make clear, just because he's throwing it back and getting mad, that doesn't mean it's toilet paper. Like, he was doing that. Yeah, you're right. He was doing that for a while with the streamers.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Which is why I brought up, because I wasn't sure. So I trust your judgment more than my own, Matt.
Well, I'm just going by
many things.
I'm going by my memory, and I could be wrong, but that is how I remember it. I do not remember there being toilet paper thrown. Earlier, I guess, is what I would say.
So moving on to something that could have used a toilet paper because it is shitty. Heyo! After the match, a jubilant Prince Nana raises Jimmy's hand in victory. He grabs the mic and he tells us that tonight the embassy will party like it's 1979. Jade Chung starts clapping. Nana gets mad at her for clapping. He tells her that her job is to be a footstool, and that's all, nothing else. Why are you clapping? Nana says he's going to show the fans a trick he taught Jade Chung. He asks Jimmy if he remembers the bunion he had on his foot a couple weeks ago. At this point, Nana then tells Jimmy to take off his boot and his sock, and he tells Jade he's going to make her do what she's been doing every night. Nana says at this point, he tells the crowd that Jimmy has athlete's foot, and in addition to a bunion, so Jimmy clearly not practicing good hygiene at this point. Dude, take care of your feet. Nana then calls Jade Jackie Chan and tells her to kiss Jimmy's foot. She's hesitant, but she eventually leans in to do it. And at that point, Rave just grabs her face and grinds it into his foot. Chung stands up. She's disgusted. And as Nana and Rave are laughing, she's behind them, and you can see Jade Chung getting pissed off. And she actually rears her hand back to slap him. This is the first time in Ring of Honor we've actually seen Jade, like, not just be something other than completely subservient, actually, like, get angry. And then as she's raising back to slap him, Nana turns around. She basically crumples back to her knees in fear and despair. Nana laughs. He pulls her around by the hair. He actually kind of kicks at her even. And the crowd chants asshole, and they all go back to the back together. So the thing I thought that was funny, or maybe not funny, about this, Matt, was we had just seen a show ago. They had done a whole segment where they had said, you know, Nana treated Jade Chung horribly, and it was so gross, we can't even show you what they did. Well, that's why we're editing here on the show. This show, like, when you do that, I realize they're doing that to try and sell how horrible Nana is to Chung, but when you do something like that, then it creates this weird implication that everything you see from this point on, Ring of Honor's kind of okay with, which is weird. Like,
yeah.
Like they cut out what was on the last show, but apparently they thought this was okay then.
Yeah, on the episode of An Honorable Mention that talks about this, Shane Hagedorn sort of says, like, maybe it was just the reason they cut out in the last show was really just so they didn't have to show an Outcast kill his promo. But it's also possible that they were just like, they just really had to figure out a place to shave time, and that was where they did it, and they didn't need to on this show. But yeah, no, you're right. Like, if I don't think that what happened on the show before was any more horrible than this. But it actually did have a more important angle. Although maybe this angle was more important because Jade Chung was starting to stand up for herself, and they were foreshadowing the eventual turn. But yeah, like I said, several more months of this. I'm looking forward to when they get past this whole angle, because it does not play well at all anymore. I mean, that implies that it ever did, but it didn't. So, yeah.
That brings us to the Ring of Honor Pure title match. Samoa Joe successfully defends the title, defeating Austin Aries in 17 minutes, 10 seconds. Before the match starts, as Todd Sinclair is explaining the rules, Prince Nana walks back to the ring and he grabs the mic. Nana offers Aries long limousines, jet airplanes, and any woman in the world he wants. So he's literally quoting Ric Flair here. If he just joins the embassy, he'll give him all of that. Aries rejects him. Nana just is unfazed. He starts bragging about all his wealth, all his riches. So at this point, Aries snatches the microphone back, and he tells Nana slowly, he goes, I have more important things to do. And then he tells Nana, go to the back and draw my bathwater, and maybe we can talk later, which is like a big ooh, oh, snap moment. He's, saying Nana's line against Nana. Nana's pissed off. He storms to the back. The crowd chants, you got served. So again, we're starting another big angle here, and I think this is not even the first time we've started a embassy feud by having Prince Nana basically comes. I think he did this with I forget. It was the CM Punk feud where CM Punk had just wrestled somebody. I forget who. Nana comes to the ring and like offers the guy a slot in Generation X. The guy turns it down. Punk laughs, and Nana gets angry. So they're going back to that well of Nana gets pissed off because someone rejects him or laughs at him. Boom, we get an embassy feud. But anyway,
and Aries tells him to draw his bathwater, which is it's turnabout, because Nana always tells people to do that for him.
Yes, and Matt, I want to have first crack at the match after this one, so we're going to switch things up a little. You're going to get to do the first crack at this match too. So this is the third match these two guys have had in 7 or 8 months, or actually fourth, the third that we've seen, because these guys did the title change at Final Battle 2004. They did the third anniversary week show, which was the rematch where Aries retained. They did the empty arena match that was filmed just for a do or die release of mostly pre-show matches, and that was supposed to be like the big match, exclusive match to get you to buy that we have not watched because we don't cover the do or die shows. And then this was the fourth and I believe final match for a while between these two. So, what did you think about the match, and also, how's it stack up? Because this is the fourth time these guys have wrestled in less than a year. So what'd you think?
Yeah. So the first match between these two guys. Well, first of all, I didn't watch the empty arena match. Did you?
No, I have not.
Yeah. So I can really only compare it to the two that were in front of crowds. The first match had the emotion. It had the it had, Joe at the end of his long title reign, Aries sort of being the underdog, even though he was the heel, and that rising action at the end of the match where the crowd was suddenly like, oh shit, and then this incredible explosion at the finish. The second match had the character work of Aries kind of being a bit of a chicken shit, and sneaking away with the title at the end. This match didn't have the character work. It didn't have the emotion. This match was much more just about action. It was a fast paced, like all action kind of match. I'd say it felt like the least, pure title match that I could think of. Like even though they did the rope break stuff, I feel like even if they didn't have those rules, the match would not have been that different. You know what I mean? Like they would have just taken out a few of the spots. Mm-hmm. But like it didn't feel like a quote pure title match. It just felt like a match between these two guys. And they did a lot of their spots, and everything looked good, and it was fast paced and it was exciting. And Aries, by the end, both guys were out of rope breaks, and at the end, like they were doing a lot of big dueling chants, and Aries is sort of trying to get this combo that he got to beat Joe, and he gets most of it, but doesn't quite get all of it in succession the way he did. And Joe, comes back with his flurry of slaps after he kicks out of the 450. And Aries goes back for a second 450, and Joe just pops up out of nowhere and slaps Aries and hits the muscle buster and wins. I thought it was all action, and it was good. Like, it was quite good, but I think I probably enjoyed it more than the anniversary show match just because of the action. But I just don't think it had as much behind it as the other matches. So I definitely didn't like it as much as their first match. The other thing is, I feel like this is sort of before Aries really finds what he is after his title reign. He's a babyface now, mostly, although he does flip off the crowd at one point. But he's mostly a babyface at this point, but he doesn't really have a character yet, so it sort of is just kind of like Joe versus a guy who's like really good and over, but like, it's like, who is Austin Aries? I think Aries hasn't figured it out yet, so I think that took it down a little bit too. But it was definitely a good match, like a very solidly good match, just not something that's particularly memorable.
I thought this was the worst of their three matches that we've seen, and I thought this was kind of Joe and Aries by the numbers, but I would still say these guys are so talented. Joe and Aries by the numbers, I would still say is pretty darn good. Like, I would still say 3 3/4 stars. And I said on a recent show that Aries in 2005 so far to me is like the king of the 3 3/4 star match, because I would put so many matches of his from this year in that exact ring where it's just a sliver away from being great, but there's something missing. But it's funny because, and he has had, to be clear, matches in this year I think would be great. Like, I love the Punk title change. I think the first the cage match he has with Colt Cabana is a legitimately great match. But I think the weird thing about this one is, and a couple of those matches, even though I've been giving Aries so many of this matches this year the same rating, there's been a couple of them like this one where I don't necessarily think that's his fault, because like I actually feel here, and again, it's a very good match. It's a little disappointing when we consider the talent of the two guys involved, but I actually think Aries was the guy bringing more unique stuff to the table in this match than Joe. I think Joe was just kind of doing everything you've seen before. I thought Aries actually pulled out a few neat things. Like, he's doing a little bit where he's trying to do Joe's moves. He's being cocky. Like, he tries to do the Joe's chest kick and then knee drop combination, but Joe avoids the knee drop. Later, he does the STF to Joe, which is Joe's move. Aries does a really great missile drop kick, almost like the Colt Cabana one we've seen recently, where he's almost vertical when he hits it. But this one, he actually then falls straight on top of Joe into a cover, which was really cool. And
I also like when he missed the 450 and landed on his ass. That was fun.
Oh yeah, that was a really cool too. Yeah, exactly. And he even teases doing the Olay kick to Joe, and then he flips the crowd off, which is funny because I feel like just like every show, Matt, I think toilet paper's thrown in, and then you point out that it isn't true. I feel like there's been 4 or 5 shows, and you haven't done it in this show, where you're like, Generation X, this is where they turn face, right? They're faces now. And then the next show, Aries will do something heel, which he does here because literally he's like, he teases the Olay kick and then he flips off the crowd. It's like, you're not getting it, which is such a clear heel thing.
Well, that's what I meant. That's what I meant when he said he doesn't really know what he is yet. Like that's sort of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's such a weird, but I feel like he's kind of been that way the entire year. It's so weird. Like they never really had like a set. Every time you think, oh, he's supposed to be a heel, he would kind of do something kind of noble. And every time you thought, oh, well, is he kind of turning face here? He would do something like that. And you'd go, well, now I don't get it. But that'll get clearer soon. But I thought the coolest thing Aries did in this match was he does the low pay, the tope between the first and second ropes. But he actually does it to the ringside area over where a new ringside table is. So he actually has to fly over the table. And I thought that was really cool where he has to come with such force that he clears like an extra bit of distance to get to Joe. I thought that was really cool. But again, this match is just that I agree with you that it's a pure title match that doesn't feel that much like a pure title match. It just like, I think you put it best where you point at the first 2 matches were about things. Like the first match had that emotion that you'll never be able to recreate. The second match had some story elements to it. This match doesn't really have a hook. And I do feel like they were going for a little bit of a story thing at the end. And I feel it's the first match of 2 matches on this show that get kind of botched because I don't know if you noticed this, but the one story that this match does have is a classic, pure title story where, late in the match, Aries hits the 450, the move he beat Joe with for the title, and Joe has 1 rope break left, and he's near the ropes, so Joe gets the foot on the ropes, and it saves Joe. And then not long later, Joe gets the win. He hits the muscle buster, and if you notice, when he gets Aries in the muscle buster, he actually walks like back towards the turnbuckle a little bit more than he usually does with the muscle buster. And if you watch the pin, Aries keeps trying to get his foot on the ropes, but he's like staying on his foot, but he can't quite get it until after the pins count. And what I think that was supposed to be is Aries had already used all 3 rope breaks. So I'm thinking that Aries was supposed to get I could be wrong about this, but I think Aries was supposed to get his foot on the ropes for that because then the story point could have been Joe beat him because of the pure rules. Like Joe, when Aries hit his finisher on Joe, Joe had 1 rope break left, so he used it. When Joe hits his finisher on Aries, Aries has no rope breaks left, so it doesn't matter that he gets his foot on the ropes. And it would have been sort of like, yes, Joe beat Aries, but it's because of these special rules they've never wrestled against each other before. But that's what my impression. I don't know if that was their intention, but I definitely got that impression. Which is sad because I thought that would have been kind of like the neatest story hook this match could have had, and it doesn't really come off. And the announcers don't talk about it either because it doesn't really happen. So after the match, we joined Gary Michael Capetta backstage with the new Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions, the Carnage Crew. Loke says tonight isn't about the war they've been having with Dunn and Marcos. It's about the 11 years in the business he's been in, the 14 years in the business DeVito's been in, the 3 years they've been in Ring of Honor together, and for once it's all about them. DeVito and Loke are off to the nudie bar, but not before DeVito tells Gary that he's not invited, and Gary gives this adorable little hey in response. I like the idea that Gary thought he was going to get to leave the show in the middle of the show to go to the nudie bar with Loke and DeVito.
The funny part is, being where I know, where this show was, I think I know what nudie bar they were going to because I used to work like right around there, and I never went in. I swear I never went in, but I would have to walk by one like every morning to get to work. They were open, like giving out cards and stuff, like little like flyers to get people to come in at like 8:30 in the morning every morning on 33rd Street.
Who goes to a nudie bar at 8:30?
I think people are more like leaving probably at that time.
I guess, yeah.
Yes, it's yes. I don't think that place is there anymore. Tom Feely, if you're listening, you know what I'm talking about. That place. We never went in. I swear.
Yeah, I was thinking you cleared your name. You were roping on a friend of ours, but. So that brings us
he
to
never went in. Tom's wife, he never went in. I swear.
We just looked through the window.
No, we made fun of its existence together. That's what happened.
So next we're up to the European Rounds match, a first in Ring of Honor history. Nigel McGuinness, who was escorted to the ring by his corner man for this match, Ring of Honor student Smash Bradley, defeated Colt Cabana, who his corner man was Ring of Honor student Derek Dempsey. Nigel won 2 falls to 1, 13 minutes, 45 seconds. Colt won the first fall with what I would describe as in 5:33 by pinfall, and what I would describe as a sunset flip without the flip. He just kind of pulled him over. McGuinness submitted Cabana to tie the match in 11 minutes, 6 seconds when he used a submission where he basically twisted Cabana's legs almost like a Texas cloverleaf while he kneeled on his arm behind him in like a hammerlock position, kind of hard to describe. And then McGuinness won the match with the third fall. He pinned Cabana at 13:45 when he sat down on an attempted Cabana sunset flip and just hooked his legs. So for you that don't know the rules to this match, for all of you, before the match, the rules are read by Bobby Cruz. He says it's 8 3-minute rounds, with the winner being decided by 2 pinfalls, 2 submissions, or a knockout. Punches and kicks in the match are illegal. Wrestlers have standing 10 counts anytime they get knocked to the mat, like a last man standing match. And breaking the rules results in a public warning, and 3 public warnings from the ref results in a disqualification. So kind of similar to the pure title rules, in some respects, kind of a little bit different, mostly with the round format. So, Matt, this is where I have to get on my soapbox. I have thought about what I was going to say this match for a while because I have a lot of thoughts on this, believe it or not. So, okay, here we go. I think we give our honest opinions on the show because that's all we can offer. And, we differ a little bit from each other and we differ occasionally from consensus, but we're not really a contrarian podcast. We don't really have crazy hot takes that are that different. Matt, there has never been a match that we have covered on Through the Years in 71 episodes where I have disagreed more with the consensus than this match. Because if you go online, the reviews for this match are like 2 stars or less than 2 stars. The Honorable Mention podcast, our friends there, they did not like this match. The live reports from this match said this was the one match on the show the crowd did not like. Matt, I am here to tell you, until where I'm going to tell you, not only did I like this match, I think this is a great match. I would go 4 stars and feel almost chicken that I'm not giving it 4 1/4. I will tell you, this is my favorite match on the show. So I will lay out my case now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, why I think this is the best match on the show and why this is a legitimately great match. Okay, first off, are the rules convoluted and kind of dumb? Yes. But I would argue one of the reasons gimmick matches are usually dumb is because the rules don't add to the match or the wrestlers don't even take advantage of the rules. Every rule in this match helps tell the story of that they're going for in this match. And this match actually tells a legit story that is informed not just by the characters, but the feud. Because the story of this match is, one, Colt Cabana is trying to beat Nigel McGuinness at his own game. He doesn't just want to beat Nigel anymore. He wants to beat him at the British style, which is why they're doing a European rules type match. But most importantly, this is the first match we ever see of Nigel's new character, in my opinion. That trickster Nigel we'll see for the next year plus. We've seen him turn heel already, but this is the first match where he's doing all sorts of cool, neat little, very cerebral, tricky things. And this match is just full of those things. And so going back, every rule in this match is used to tell that story of Nigel outwitting Colt and really having a million heel tricks up his sleeve. So, for example, all right, the 10 counts, the rule they use the least. That one is only Colt milks it at one point, kind of gets up like, hey, I'm okay. He just milks it to get a rest. So that's the one rule they don't really take full advantage of. But every other rule here, first off, between rounds, and a round can end either when the 3-minute time limit or when a wrestler is loses a fall, they immediately go to a break where they go to their corners. I think they sit down on stools. Their cornermen, give them water, towel them off, just like a fight or a boxing match. So at the start of every new round, Nigel has a new trick. One round, he takes the towel he was being toweled off with, and he throws it at Colt's face, to like distract him. Another one, when he's getting the swig of water, unbeknownst to everybody, he doesn't swallow the water. So when they go back in the middle of the ring to start the round, he spits it right in Colt's eyes. Another round, while he's sitting in the corner, he grabs the iron he always took to him to the ring in every match at this point in his career. And when the ref immediately's like, you can't have this in the ring, and takes it away from him, the ref is distracted, and he hits Colt with an illegal punch, I believe. So that rule helps his match. The rule about the time limits, there's one point where Colt hits a big, he literally says Ariba as he does like the flying forearm, and he goes for the cover, and the time limit has expired, so they don't get to count the pin. So you use that to get the classic kind of saved by the heel saved by the bell finish. And, the no punches rule is used here where, there's multiple times where, Nigel will go to throw a punch, when the ref isn't looking, and then Colt will get mad and throw a punch when the ref is looking. So all of that stuff, it's just so many, it's not one heel thing. There's so many little tricks like that. And it's just telling such a great, I love that it's, I can see why people don't like this match because the rules are convoluted. This isn't a match about a lot of near falls or pushing the pace or a ton of really cool moves. This is super about telling a story and about these two people's personalities. But I love it because it's about these two guys' specific personalities. Like this is a match that these two could have that not everyone could have. It's, it's about this new character wrestling, a guy, Nigel's kind of new character is kind of the heel version of Colt, where Colt's always about kind of having these fun-loving little tricks where he'll be like, look up in the air, or what's that? And then he'll distract a guy. Where Nigel's tricks is also kind of this trickster wrestler, but they're all heel tricks. And there's so many cool moments. Like there's even a moment in this match where Colt gets Nigel in a half Boston Crab, and Nigel like taps Colt on the back, like slaps on the back. And it's not a tap out, and Colt releases the hold because he thinks it's the referee telling him you've won the match. And it's just like Nigel does so many neat little tricks like that. And I just feel like I love the story of the match. I love how it plays into their feud too, because this feud's actually about something, Matt. So many feuds are just about one guy wants to beat the other, which yes, that's every wrestling match is technically about that storyline. But I love that the storyline is actually about, Colt wants to be better than Nigel at Nigel's style. And he wants to even try and, in this match, he tries to even do tricks like Nigel. And I even love, like, it's informed. I know I've been going on. I'll give it to you, but I just want to even say, I love that even the whole feud is informed by reality because, like, Colt really did in 2004 leave on his first tour of Europe and kind of fall in love with the European style and integrate that into his own style. And then after this match, there'll be a promo later where Colt is just like pissed off. He's like, I have to go away. I have to learn more. And he really does that. He spends the next month in like the UK and Germany learning more of the European style. So I love this feud. I love this match. And I realize I love it more than probably anyone that's ever watched this match. Most people do not like this match. They think it's worse than average. Matt, I know I'm crazy. I think this is a great match, but tell me how crazy I am.
Well, I was very entertained by what you just said. I don't want to be the party pooper. I like this feud a lot, too. I especially love their match in Chicago, which had all the story that you are kind of ascribing to this match. And when I saw this match live, it really did not play well live. People were very confused. They liked the characters, so they weren't, like, shitting on it. But, like, people were not feeling it. I will say it plays better on DVD than it did live. And I don't think this is terrible. Like, I remember this being a huge shit show live. Like, just like, what was that? On DVD, you can see what it was. And I think your review is going to get a lot of people to revisit this match. Maybe even including the wrestlers themselves. I don't know if somehow this gets to them. Because I know that they never really were big defenders of the match either. But here's the thing. All the story that you see in the match, it didn't come across to most of the viewers. And, like, I don't see how you could take that as anything other than, like, even if you like it, like a bit of a failed experiment. Like, they certainly tried, and they certainly put a lot of thought into it. But the rules were just too much for people to take in all at once. And, this is the second match in a row where you have to stand there and listen to a big long list of rules, which I don't think helped the match's cause a little bit. And the crowd's already chanting bullshit at the first warning, which didn't really bode well. Some of the stuff that you liked about it, I didn't love, like Nigel's tapping the back of Colt Cabana. I just feel like, well, that seems too easy. Like, all you have to do is tap the guy's back and he thinks he wins. Like, that just seems too easy. Like I said, I do appreciate the character work. I appreciate, the comedy and the different ways they play on it. But the way it just didn't get any momentum. And the chicanery, while fun, I feel like eventually they needed to transition into another gear to really take it to the next level. So while I don't think this match is 2 stars or below, I would say it is not the first or second or third best match on this show, in my opinion. I think maybe the 4th best match on the show is probably closer to where it lands for me. I just think that it didn't do for the audience what it needed to do. I agree with you in the sense of they had a lot of ideas and they really went for it, and they put thought into the match, which, a lot of guys, they don't put this kind of thought into a match, and you do have to appreciate that. And the character work, these characters do mesh well together. But I still think in just terms of how it came across, this is the worst of their series. Still not bad, but yeah, I will be interesting to see when people revisit the match, as they will, whether they see what you're seeing. Because maybe they will. Maybe you're going to give this match new life as a forgotten classic, and this show will be remembered for doing that. Hey, I hope so, because I like it when people like things, but I didn't see it.
I just want to say this match review has been a great example of just how sweet a guy, like Matt's one of the nicest people I know, where he sounded almost apologetic for not having my crazy, sharing my crazy love of this match. When I want to make clear again, nobody else even likes this match. Like, Matt, you're being fair in your re-review of it. You're being fairer to it than, or not fairer to it, but more positive about than pretty much anyone. Like, I'll even go to the live notes from the Observer. Meltzer wrote that about the whole show. It was a super hot show for almost everyone except the European rules match. Nigel McGuinness beat Cabana in a European rules match with 2 out of 3 falls. Match said to be boring live as people didn't understand the rounds or the rules. A lot of the crowd crapped on. And I should note, we talked about how hot this crowd is. This is the only match on the show where I feel like the crowd's kind of not in, even though they still make some noise for some spots, you can tell a lot of the people aren't into it. So when you said this match is a failure, I can completely while I personally think this is a great match, I really enjoyed it. I think it's 4 stars. I have to agree it was a failure because a match, is meant, most wrestlers are trying to entertain the masses. It didn't entertain anyone but me. And let me tell you, if you just entertain Trevor Dame, you're a failure.
It does. I mean, it truly did come off worse in person. There's no doubt about it. It came off really bad in person, and I don't think it comes off really bad on DVD. It's just awkward, I guess, is what I would say. But you can appreciate the nuances a lot more watching on TV than you could live when you're trying to make sense of what the hell's going on. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah.
This is a match where I also think it's just more, stuff that's more about subtle character work and things like that probably plays way better not live, when, especially with a crowd that's so revved up, I think probably. But there's just so many things I like about this. I didn't even mention things I love that the first fall is Colt winning with basically a sunset flip, and then the third fall is him losing because he tries to do it again, but now Nigel has it scouted and he clamps down on the legs and gets the win that way. I love that there's a moment where Colt goes for a sunset flip again in the middle of the match, and Nigel bridges out of a sunset flip, and so Colt kicks away his arms because he wants him to fall back flat for the pin, and Nigel's neck is so strong, he's just bridging that way. So Colt's like, what do I do? And he just punches Nigel in the balls. And I mean, it's just cute little moment. Like, the match is full of just cute little moments to me like that. Like, if I was describing what the story of this match is, people sometimes say, oh, matches are great when they're like human chess, where it's like a real battle of wits. To me, this was almost like two guys that are really good at cheating at cards. And it's like Colt and Nigel were playing poker, and Colt's like, I have 5 aces, I win the hand. And then Nigel's like, I have 6 aces, I win. And it's just two guys. Go on.
Now, I guess what I would say is all of their matches are like that, and the other ones don't have the awkwardness of the rounds and the confusion involving the rules, I guess is what I would say.
I think even the rules add to that. But I realize that's probably my biggest disagreement, because I think most people, the rules is what immediately gets them to turn off of this match. Like you were saying right from the start, with you pointed out where Bobby Cruz talked about the rules, you can already hear fans being like, this is fucking stupid bullshit.
But it's just too many rules. Like, it was,
yeah.
I mean, like I wrote a whole paragraph of the rules, like, and I know Dave Meltzer wants, like you told me, that he wants every ROH match in 2021 to have the pure title rules. But, like, at least at that point, you won't have to read them before every match anymore. This one, I mean, I know you already said them, but it's like, there will be 8 3-minute rounds. Winner will be decided by 2 pinfalls, 2 submissions, or a knockout. Punches and kicks are not allowed. After being thrown to the mat, the wrestler has a standing 10 count to get back to his feet. Breaking the rules will result in an automatic disqualifications. Wait, a public warning. 3 public warnings will result in an automatic disqualification. Like, he actually, like, messes up the rules the first time. Like, just the crowd is just like, all right, we get it. There's rules. Like, I feel like that was sort of the way the crowd treated it live. Like I said, you could take it in a lot more on video. But I do think a lot of the things that you mentioned as strengths of this match is present in all of their other matches. Like, and so it doesn't feel quite as novel to me as it does to you, I guess.
And I guess the one thing we also didn't mention is this is a match where we get another Matt Hardy interruption where the screen pixelates, and we get a Matt Hardy promo where he goes, there's only one show left until he comes to Ring of Honor. Matt says he's a fan of Ring of Honor and that Christopher Daniels needs to prepare for a twist of fate. I guess the one weird thing about this, and maybe this was something that was more on the website at the time, but we've now seen, Matt on 2 shows do these very short promos hyping up the Daniels match, but like we have no idea on the promos why he's wrestling Christopher Daniels.
Yeah, that's true. Although with ROH, they do just put random matches sometimes, so it's not that crazy. But the interesting thing about the promo in this match is this was, I don't know if you noticed this, the only time the announcers acknowledged it. Like, the other times the announcers are like, wait, what was that? And this time they're like, whoa, Matt Hardy versus Christopher Daniels? I can't believe it. So, like, that's a nonsensical thing, too. Like, why can they see his promo this time but not the other times?
And in the world of Matt Hardy, also it seems kind of weird, like, why does he have to hack into the show mid-match to get promos? Like, don't you think Ring of Honor would have been happy to give him promo time? Like, he was a big deal right here. Like, the idea that he's, like, just, on some pirate band satellite feed, like, in his basement, like, I'm going to hack in during this match, this Nigel McGuinness Colt Cabana match everyone except one weird Canadian hates. And I'm going to get a promo in right in the middle of it. Like, what? But anyway, we go backstage where Roderick Strong is in a very dingy part of the New Yorker hotel, I would say. He's taping up his hands with his back turned to us in the camera. Austin Aries walks up to him, and he puts his hands around Roddy's neck and traps and shoulders in a really weird, aggressive way. And Roddy at this point goes, "What's up, baby?" And I'm like, what? And then Aries gives Roddy a very quick and intense pep talk, which was really weird, where he's like, you got to win the title tonight. Tonight's your night. Don't worry about Alex Shelley. Don't worry that I just lost a pure title match. He goes, tonight's about you. And then he slaps Roddy on the chest, and he puts his hands, again, really aggressively on the side of Roddy's neck, on each side of it. And he goes, "Are you fucking ready?" And then from behind the camera, Gabe asks if they want to cut a promo. And Aries tells him to shut up. We've got more important things to do. And another thing I love about, just beyond how weird the energy of this promo was, Matt, was the night before, the whole storyline was that, CM Punk does like a 10 to 12 minute promo at the start of the show, and they keep announcing talking during that whole show on the last Ring of Honor show about how because Punk went into business for himself and took up so much promo time, no one can have the backstage promos they want. There's no backstage promos on this show because of Punk being so selfish, and isn't that horrible? And then tonight, two of the only guys to get backstage promos, Colt and Aries, I mean, there's one or two others, but they both are basically like, I don't want to fucking do a promo tonight. Like, they're telling the guys, like, I don't want to do a promo. Leave me alone, after they did the show before where the storyline was like, how dare Punk steal this valuable promo time from these wrestlers? They're pissed.
That's true. Although I will say this, I liked this segment. I think it hit the right notes for what they were going for. Like, just Aries kind of gotten Strong's back, and Strong like kind of just being the young guy who's just sort of like, he doesn't totally know what to do with his energy, but he knows that he's going to make the most of it. Like, I feel like this is probably the best they could have done here.
I feel like the content was good. I feel like just the weird physicality and the "What's up, baby?"
What's up, baby? That's what I say to you every time that we that you answer the Skype call.
But I did really like. No, I like the idea of what they're trying to do between like Gibson with Roddy and now Aries with Roddy. Like the idea that getting the title back in Ring of Honor and not letting Punk escape with it is so important that everyone, when someone else gets a title shot, everyone's just like, yeah, win the title. Like they're almost like giving up their competitiveness because the most important thing is just that any one of them wins it, which exactly. I do like that, how that puts over the belt.
Yeah, puts over the belt, puts over the company, puts over that Punk is an outsider. Yep.
Yeah. So I'll take the first shot on this match too, and then Matt, you'll get first crack at the big main event. So this next match is the semi-main event. It's Homicide defeating Jay Lethal by pinfall in 19 minutes, 12 seconds after he hit a lariat, and that lariat, first, what set up that lariat was Homicide wraps a chain around his fist and punches Jay right in the back of his previously injured neck. So, Matt, you said earlier that there was a match that you felt like the crowd really factored into it. I said I had in my notes a match that I thought it was. This is the match I think it is. First off, before anything, is this the match where the crowd is just going nuts that you were thinking about?
Oh, yeah. And, as a live experience, even more so, which I guess I'll get to shortly.
This match, the crowd, it's weird because Homicide is always over in New York. But even by Homicide in New York standards, this crowd is fucking nuts. I was shocked. This is almost not quite like a Kobashi or a Just Incredible debuts in Ring of Honor pop, which again, go back to that episode. That is the metric by which I judge pops in Ring of Honor, because Just Incredible legit got one of the biggest pops in Ring of Honor history.
In wrestling history.
This crowd is fucking ape shit for Homicide. There's just like this, and as opposed to just like one large pop, there's just like this energy and this like kind of, you can hear just like a bunch of conversations and there's just this weird energy and buzz Homicide has where he feels like the hottest wrestler in the world, and they're just so loud for him the whole match long. And as for the match itself, I would also say it's funny because as over as Homicide is, there still is also a lot of people backing Jay Lethal. Like, it's weird. You would think a crowd this hot for Homicide, there'd be no one on Lethal's side, but a lot of people are also still cheering for Lethal. There's lots of 50-50 dueling chants here. But as for the match itself, it's weird. I could see this match, people giving it 3 stars. I could see people going almost to 4. I'm somewhere in the middle. I think it's a good match, but I think it's a flawed match. Jay Lethal, really takes it to Homicide at first, and I liked, it's weird, like, the physicality of what he was doing early on had good urgency, like his body language and the moves he was doing and brawling on the outside. It was like how he should be wrestling for a guy who just injured him, who he dislikes, but his facial expressions had like no emotion to them. It was really weird, and it was one of those things where so often in wrestling we see guys where like they either don't have charisma or they have charisma. And Jay Lethal at this stage in his career was really weird, where it was like he would show it sometimes and sometimes not, and sometimes in the same match. Because I feel like this match, later in the match when he makes a big fiery comeback, it's a much better comeback than he had the night before. And he does show good charisma, and he's really screaming and playing to the crowd. And it's weird, like in the same match you can see a guy where he goes from being kind of robotic facially to really playing it up well. And he was still a guy, learning that part of wrestling. I think he had the in-ring moves more at this point than a complete handle on the character point. And clearly we've talked about his promos too. The match, I think, Jay Lethal controls early. Homicide really slows it down in the middle like he usually does as a heel, but which is kind of interesting because the crowd is still treating him like the babyface of all baby faces and just loves him. And then I think where this match will get divisive is near the end, because the commentary talks about early on how this match is, quote, relaxed rules. And in the last, quarter or whatever, it gets very WWE-ish, where there's run-ins from Homicide's nameless gang members, one of them who is Grim Reaper, who literally does a top rope move to Jay Lethal. He does like a top rope sidewalk slam to Jay Lethal, and it's just allowed. They bring a table in the ring, and Homicide goes to put Lethal through the table, I guess to get revenge for Lethal putting him through the table the last time they were in New York. But instead, Lethal reverses it to a top rope DDT through the table. And there's a kick out, which seemed like a shocking kick out for the heel to kick out of a move that big. And then, Matt, I feel like the finish, there's a bit of a botch here, because after all of that, Jay Lethal hits the dragon suplex, and Homicide, as the heel in this feud, kicks out of it cleanly. And and the announcers then try to act like, Julius Smokes pulled the ref out of the ring. But if you watch the match, yes, Julius Smokes does pull the ref out of the ring right before the 3 count.
And I think just to be pedantic, I think it was that other guy, the other random corner man that pulled the ref out.
Oh, yeah, you're right. There is another, for those who don't see the match, there's like multiple random corner men, one who is Grim Reaper, one who I can't identify. And of course, whenever Homicide is in New York, he has these posse members that for some reason the announcers will refuse to ever acknowledge by name. Even in he wasn't on this show, but on other shows, when it's Monster Mac, a guy that used to wrestle for Ring of Honor, and they will never acknowledge any of them by name. It's kind of infuriating. But anyway, yeah, the guy pulls Smokes out, but Homicide kicks out clean from the babyface's finisher, and I think he wasn't supposed to, so I don't know if Homicide just forgot Smokes was going to pull, or not Smokes, the other guy was going to pull the ref out of the ring, or if he just got worried that the guy wouldn't. But either way, he does, and I feel like that combined with him kicking out of the top rope DDT kind of creates this weird environment where Homicide kind of survived a lot for being the heel of this match. But overall, I don't know if I liked all the bells and whistles in the last quarter of the match or not. I feel like I would give this match probably like 3.25, 3.5 stars. There were some slow bits in the middle, but it's weird. It doesn't feel like a Ring of Honor match, but I will say this, Matt, through it all, I wasn't bored, and I do think the crowd was fucking amazing. But I almost feel like the crowd was also the detriment, because I felt like this crowd was reacting like this was like the most important, coolest, biggest match ever, and almost made me be a little harsher on the match than I would have otherwise, because I was almost like, the crowd is treating this way better than it deserves, actually, even though it wasn't a bad match. But what'd you think about all of this?
Well, remember, it's very hard for me to separate the match from my live experience, because this was such a memorable live experience. There would be other shows with more crazy crowds than this. But, to be there, as one of my first ROH shows and experience this, it's so I went to this show with a friend of mine who is not a wrestling fan at all, really doesn't like wrestling. He's not like he has, subtle interests, can get into it every once in a while. He just doesn't like it at all. He went sort of, because it was around my birthday, and he was like, all right, this is a thing to do with my friend for his birthday, is go to this show. And so the one person that really stuck with him after this show that he would still remember and ask about was Homicide, because of the way the crowd was reacting to him. He was like a folk hero to this crowd. Whereas the rest of the show, he couldn't care less. He was like, all right, well, I guess that was kind of entertaining, but I don't remember it 5 minutes later. You know what I mean? He just is that kind of person, just doesn't like wrestling at all. But Homicide stuck with him. And the next year, we kind of did the same thing. We went to another show around the same time. He sort of just kind of went, it's all right, it's something to do around my birthday, with me. And nice friend, doing that stuff. But like he still was like asking about Homicide. He remembered Homicide. When Homicide came out, he's like, "Oh yeah, good to see Homicide again." Um, this match was the most memorable match live in a lot of ways, and yeah, because of the crowd. So the extent that Homicide was not treated like a total heel here, I forgive a lot. Because he wasn't a heel to this crowd. Like, he was but the funny thing is, Lethal was not a heel either. The crowd was not booing Jay Lethal at any point, right?
No.
Like, they loved Homicide, but they still liked Jay Lethal. So it created this pretty unique atmosphere where they were just going crazy. They were getting excited when he wiped his ass with the Red Sox hat. Like, they just were having a great time. It was interesting, though, after the show at the Supper Club, that the crowd wasn't nearly as into Homicide there as they are at these New Yorker shows. I don't know what that's all about, but, Homicide just felt like the biggest superstar. And, I think maybe Gabe knew that it was impossible for Homicide to be a heel in Manhattan in this era, so it didn't really matter, if he's kicking out of stuff, because it's just like, he's the hero, it doesn't matter. But the one thing I did find interesting, about the match being relaxed rules, isn't that pretty much all Homicide matches? Like, he could just throw chairs at people and stuff and nothing happens. Like, I mean, I guess they did do some stuff with outside interference and like a fireball, he got disqualified, but it just feels very like based on convenience, like when we need it, we'll disqualify Homicide, but when we don't need to, he can do whatever he wants still and not get disqualified. You know what I mean? But because of all that, this was my favorite match on the show. I'm not saying it was the best match, but it was my favorite. I thought it was the most fun to watch. It was super exciting. The atmosphere was chaotic. Homicide, he brings out the fork, which I definitely did not expect when I was there. Lethal's blade job at first was really bad, and I think he must have bladed again. Gabe says this is the first time he's ever bled, so I'm sure that's why. But by the time he does what seems like his third blade job, he has a decent amount of blood coming down his face. So I guess he gets the hang of it. But yeah, it's just a bunch of, like you described most of the moves. It's just a bunch of craziness. And I do think Lethal, for whatever you say about his charisma, he did show enough fire down the stretch that it ended up being okay. I do agree with you that the early part of the match was better than the ending. My pet peeve about the Rottweilers in this era is the fact that they use these like guys that they don't name in these spots. Like, if you're going to have this outside interference, just like commit to it, and like it feels like a crutch because they don't have the Havana Pitbulls around anymore. So they just throw out, maybe like it's a way of Homicide getting his friends on the show, but to just have like a random guy that we're never going to care about pull Jay Lethal out of the ring and have the Grim Reaper who they can't even name despite his very good name, like interfering, and Lethal can never get revenge on him. It's like, if you're going to do it, just bring in guys that you want to stick with. You know what I mean? Like, bring in guys that'll actually be characters on the show. Like, it just seems very lazy and like, and I know this is a shitty way to insult something, but like indie in a bad way, to just be like, oh, here's a guy doing a move. Like, he's just a guy, but he did this move, like I don't know. It also seems like, it's a payday, but it seems a little bit disrespectful to the wrestlers too. I don't know if they felt that way, so maybe it's not my place to say that. But I just feel like if you're going to do the interference, at least have actual members of the roster be the ones who interfere. It just, to me, that adds more heat to things. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was just such a blast. So I feel very positively about the match. I don't know about star rating, but I enjoyed it very, very, very much.
I will say this is a rare match, I would say, where like I can see people having a wide range of opinions about the match itself, but I think regardless of how you will feel about the match, I think everyone should watch this match just for the crowd reactions, because I think you'll be entertained just by – you don't see crowds this hot this very often for one guy or – a match like this. Like, this is even on a night where pretty much this crowd was hot for almost everything except the match I loved. This was hot even by that standard. It is worth watching even just for the crowd reaction.
This probably ends up being the second hottest crowd reaction to any match at the New Yorker Hotel in 2005. And I think, Trevor, you know what I'm referring to.
Oh, yeah. Homicide versus Jack Evans. Next up, we've got the Ring of Honor World Title match. We got our main event. CM Punk successfully defends the title when he defeats Roderick Strong via pinfall in 26 minutes, 28 seconds, when he basically just reverses a Roderick Strong pin attempt into a quick kind of cradle of his own. He puts the feet on the ropes. Classic cheap heel finish. Matt, we had just seen this in New York. You had just seen this live not very long before this. This is the rematch. How'd you think it stacked up with that match? What'd you think? It's another big heel, long CM Punk heel world title match.
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, so first, just some observations. There is an extremely cool moment during this entrance. So, in the match against Jay Lethal, we had the dramatic moment where Joe came down to ringside to cheer Lethal on. We don't get anything like that in this match, but what we get instead is that since the New Yorker Hotel has a balcony, our three top baby faces, I guess, the heroes, Samoa Joe, James Gibson, and Mick Foley, watch the match from the balcony. And at the beginning, it's just Joe up there. And Punk, given that Joe is his greatest rival, Punk has this immense stare down with Joe. Joe's his foot is on the balcony, the railing, and he's just looking down really sternly at Punk. And Punk sees him. He stands on the middle turnbuckle with the belt, posing as he enters, holds the belt up in the air, looks at Joe, they kind of taunt each other. It's just this great moment that, could only have happened after all this history. A really iconic visual there. The other thing is, here's something that just shows how insane, neurotic, and insecure I am. I have this so I'm kind of standing near the aisleway at this show, and I have this extremely vivid memory of when CM Punk comes out, he looks in my direction and shakes his head, and I got this real insecure moment where I'm like, oh man, he's looking at me and he thinks I'm such a tool, and I watched this entrance, and they don't edit the entrance at all. They show his entire thing. There is nothing that he does that could possibly be interpreted that way, that he's doing that at any point during his entrance. So I'm I invented this whole scenario in my head of this wrestler that I look up to, looking at me and disapproving. And there's nothing that could even be slightly interpreted that way during his entrance.
So is it safe to say this podcast has lifted a 16-year burden off your shoulders,
exactly.
Completely changing your life for the better?
The first part. But it just goes to show what a psychopath I am. But more importantly, there is the match. So again, they promote this as CM Punk's last night in ROH, and I do think that there was enough of us in the crowd that on the night believed that was possible. It seems ridiculous looking back. Of course he's gonna wrestle all these guys that he's building up matches with, but there was this feeling oh, this is his last weekend. I guess he has to leave without the belt, right? So because of that, just like with Lethal, because of that, people thought Roderick Strong could win. And in any other circumstance, that's not possible, right? There's no way that anyone would think that Roderick Strong, at the level he was at this point, would possibly be the ROH champion. But the crowd really did think it was possible on this night. And that, I think, takes the match to another level, just like it did with Lethal. And that's what makes it, you asked to compare it to their first match. There's a lot of similarities. Obviously, there's a lot of differences, mainly being the fact that this is for the title and the heel and babyface roles are completely reversed. But also, it adds that level of emotion and drama that the first match didn't have. The similarities involve Punk trying to avoid Strong's chops. And, they really take that to another level in this one. They really milk that for a while in this match. Punk avoiding chops, and not just avoiding them, but, running away every time he avoids a chop. And Punk maybe hitting his own chops, or doing eye pokes, and, all that stuff. So when Strong finally hits his first chop, it's a big moment, and the crowd goes nuts. We're basically, Punk tries to leapfrog Strong, and Strong just kind of avoids it. He just stands there, and then when Punk lands, he wails on him with a chop, and then it's Chop City, and they do boo yay chops and stuff like that, and Strong dives onto him on the outside and chops him against the guardrail, chops him till he's bleeding from the chest. Literally blood's coming out of his chest. And the crowd's chanting, break his back. And so Roderick's already doing very well as a babyface. until Punk hotshots him over the top rope, and then Punk comes back in control. And, Punk's taunting the baby faces in the balcony, pointing at Joe, saying, "I built this place, it wasn't that son of a bitch." And he's really slowing things down and working over Roderick, and the crowd's in the palm of his hands, and they do more boo yay stuff, and Punk's hitting his own backbreakers and really slowing things down with like chin locks and stuff. And then he does something which I don't know if he's done before or since. I guess he probably has on other indies, but at least in ROH, which is he does the Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels literal showing ass spot, where Strong is trying to pull Punk into a sunset flip, and he pulls down like the backside of his trunks, so Punk's ass is completely exposed, and he's doing a bunch of spots bare-assed, including being press slammed off the top rope until he gets his thumb in Roderick Strong's eye. Let me ask you something. If you were a wrestler and thought to do this, wouldn't you be scared that like the rest of your trunks would fall down?
Yeah, I would be scared to show anything ever.
Yeah. Well, no, you're not even going to show like your knees. No. You're very humble.
I can wear like a 1920s bathing suit for my wrestling attire. I don't want ankles is the most I'm going to show.
Yeah, exactly. So once Punk pulls up his trunks, that gives Strong a chance to get the double knees, the sick kick, and that's, the crowd's super into it at that point. You get some big near falls with like a drop kick, Uranagi backbreaker, and then you get to the point where there's a lot of reversals, like the half Nelson backbreaker, and Punk reverses that into an O'Connor roll, and then Strong kicks out, and Punk immediately hits a Shining Wizard, and then Strong kicks out of that, so Punk goes for the Anaconda Vice, and Strong rolls him up for two, and then Punk hits a super kick and a swinging DDT, and when he gets the Anaconda Vice, the crowd goes crazy. Strong makes the ropes, he gets the good pop. And Punk climbs to the apron very slowly and goes for a springboard leg drop. But Roderick moves, he locks in the stronghold, and the crowd is chanting, tap, tap, tap. Punk makes the ropes, does a few more of his signature spots. Punk charges at Strong with a forearm, but Strong catches him with the half Nelson backbreaker, then another backbreaker, then a pump handle slam. And this is in some ways the biggest near fall of the match, but I think they kind of telegraphed it too much because Punk rolled so close to the ropes that like there was no way he wasn't going to get his foot on the rope in that spot. And that then Strong immediately goes for the O'Connor roll. Punk reverses it into a roll-up of his own, grabs the ropes, and gets the win. This was a really good match, and like I think I like the lethal match better because I love the drama of the finish with Joe and like Punk just like staring at him with the choke on, being like a total dick. And I thought this finish was just sort of like a sneaky heel win, like just much more typical. But here's one thing that you can't deny. This was a moment for Roderick Strong. This was a moment where there was a before this match Roderick Strong and an after this match Roderick Strong. Much more so than with Lethal. After this match, Roderick Strong is a star that people can see at the main event level. And there's no going back. Within a few months, Roderick Strong is regularly main eventing shows. In some ways, he has a run as like almost a bigger deal than Aries. In fact, in the Danielson matches with Strong and Aries, it seemed much more plausible that Strong would win the title than Aries. Strong was like considered like a next big thing type of guy, and I think this match was the moment that it happened. And whatever you think about this match, you cannot take away that this was a match that made Roderick Strong. It really, really did. If you look at everything that happens this year for Roderick Strong after this match, as we'll get into over the next few months, this was a huge turning point for him. And you can thank the scenario, you can thank Punk's performance, and I think Roderick, he held up his end of the bargain. He did great. Like I said, I still think the Lethal match is a bit better, the Lethal Punk match, because just the booking and the finish, and I think Punk was just having quite a night that night. And I don't think he was quite there on this night, but in terms of the impact, this match had the greater impact, I'd say by far.
First off, Matt, you don't tell me what I can and can't take away from someone. I'll take away. No, I seriously, I agree with you, about this being an important match for Strong, but I would actually say this was my second favorite match of the night. I actually do prefer this to the Jay Lethal Punk match the night before. I think much like the night before, Punk's just having a great time and he's just in his glory and just loving everything. But to me, it's funny. This match felt kind of a little bit like a throwback, and Punk's always had a bit of a throwback streak in him. But this felt almost like the modern 2005 version of Punk doing like the Ric Flair touring heel champion. This feels like Punk wrestling like the young up-and-comer. He's the world champ, and his job is what Ric Flair's was going to every territory, which was wrestle like the up-and-coming star from the local area, make them look like $1 million, make them look like they were so close to winning, and that he'll get them next time, and leaving even though you've won, you're the guy you wrestle like a bigger star on the way out than they were coming in. And I felt like it's a match that does the story of their last match, like you mentioned, where so much of the match is about Punk avoiding chops. But I feel like this match did it way better. One, because the face heel roles being reversed, I think, fit that story better, where this time rather than Punk avoiding the chops because he's clever, he's avoiding them because he's kind of a cowardly, shitty heel. And even the way he avoids the chops, like in this time, there's moments like the story of this match where the one flaw I had in the first match these two had, even though I really liked that match quite a bit, was Punk would like avoid the chops for the first third of the match. And then when Roddy starts chopping him, the rest of the match, Punk goes like 50-50 with him in chop exchanges. And it's like, well, why were you so scared when you're like even with him on chops? And in this match, Punk spends the first third of the match like chopping like Roddy, and then immediately at some points he literally sometimes just runs away like a complete coward. Like he's just such a little prick. And then when Roddy finally does start chopping him, like Punk doesn't get many licks in back. Like when Roddy finally starts getting to chop this guy, Punk sells it like, oh shit, I'm in trouble if this guy's getting to chop me and I can't compete with those chops, which I think is a way improvement. And yeah, Punk really just leads Roddy through this match, and it's really old school in the sense of, and I can see, again, some people might not like this, but I appreciate variety. And, this is the kind of match where Punk, like you mentioned, will literally slow down the match multiple times in this match. He'll just throw on a chin lock. When Roddy starts getting control of the match, he'll just poke Roddy in the eyes. It's a very kind of like 80s match in that way. The end of the match is just him reversing a pinning move and getting, holding onto the ropes, which is a very it's purposely anticlimactic in the way the kind of old school wrestling finishes are, where it's kind of a cheap finish, but it's supposed to be cheap. It's supposed to make you pissed off that he won in such a shitty anticlimactic way. And if someone was looking for this to be more of what you imagine Ring of Honor to be in 2005, like it's going to end with 6 minutes of near falls of the most fast-paced, cutting-edge moves, it's not. It's kind of an out of nowhere, fuck, Punk screwed this guy over, and he's like rolling out of the ring and laughing about it ending. But I really like that, and I really like the story. I like the idea that Punk extends it to, he's not just avoiding chops, but like he's also at one point he does a backbreaker to Strong, and he's like, this is how you do a backbreaker. And again, he avoids Strong's backbreakers, and then when Strong finally does get the backbreakers, he hits him with like 3 or 4 of his big variations. And again, it just seems like, I'm gonna kill this guy with my backbreakers. So my flaws in this match would be, one, even though I really like that's a bit more reserved and old school and throwback, this crowd was so hot. Part of me was like, man, if they did do 2 or 3 minutes of hot near falls, the roof probably just would have gone even a level higher in terms of how just getting blown off, the roof getting blown off of things. But my main flaw in this match was, it's a criticism I've had with Punk in the past, and I haven't really noticed it in quite a while, so maybe he's gotten better or I just got immune to it, but it really rears its head here, which is Punk is the most obvious spot caller that I've ever seen in terms of wrestlers, where I've seen more obvious spot calling from wrestlers who I literally either hear them say it or see their lips move. But in terms of guys where I don't hear them say it and I don't see their lips move, there's not a more obvious spot call in the world, and he is horrible here at it. There are so many times in this. Oh, go on.
I was going to say that's why he gelled so well with John Cena. They both have that in common.
Yeah, and there are so many times in this match where Punk like throws on the chin lock or something, And even though you can't see his lips moving, you can see his head bobbing, and it's so obvious. He's leaning right into the guy's ear. You can see like Roddy's eyes go blank as he's listening, and then immediately, let's go. They do a spot, and then a minute later, chin lock, leans right in. No. They do a spot, and it is so obvious, and it's weird because Punk is such a talented wrestler, and to see a guy that is so talented and have this one like just glaring flaw where he's just terrible at it, and it just kind of takes me out of the match. But I still really, really like this match. Still my second favorite match on the show. But boy, this is a great example of how bad he was at just hiding, like calling spots. And it's funny because I when I wrote my notes, like I was like, Punk led strong through this match. And a lot of times, people go, who is responsible for this match? And I'll go, well, I don't know. I'm not a wrestler. I wasn't involved. Who led this match, because you can literally see Punk call half the goddamn match to Strong. Like he's calling a lot of the spots, and you can tell that. Yeah.
And just for the record, I like the Lethal match more, but like, I think I still probably liked both of them more than you, because I put them both at like 4 stars.
This is bordering 4 stars. I mean, I don't think I'm much lower than you. I do like the Nigel Colt match a little bit more because I'm weird, but I really like this match too. And I do think both those matches have something in common where they're both far more about telling a story than about just trying to be the most pulse-pounding action every second type match. Although, going to what your point about the Nigel match, this match is far more successful. This is accessible to everybody in that building. The Nigel Colt match was accessible only to Trevor Dame. So, like, this match was a far bigger success. And you made great points about even how it brought Roderick to another level. I think it was a match where he did a great job of making Roderick look like he was on Punk's level and making Roderick seem like a guy whose offense is something to be feared and, could destroy him. And yeah, really enjoyed it. And I'm just looking over things. Oh, another moment I really liked in this match was at one point Punk, and this probably wasn't an intentional callback, but I love on the last show when he faced Roddy, he did that big speed promo where the fans were like, "Please don't go" and stuff, and then he leans down and he kissed the Ring of Honor logo in the middle of the ring. And this match, they're back here in the same scene of the crime, same city, rematch, and now Punk is the heel, and at one point he starts tapping on that same logo in the middle of the ring, and he goes, "Come on, Roderick, ROH, ROH," and I'm sure that probably wasn't intentional, but I thought, that's such a cool little callback, where literally a couple months before he was kissing that logo, and now he's wrestling the same guy, and he's just being such a patronizing dick, like, "Oh, isn't this great, Ring of Honor?" I thought that was just great. But other thing I want to mention too, sorry, Matt, the ass spot you were talking about, referencing like Flair and Michaels, who obviously did this earlier, but I bet you he's referencing Chris Candido, because Chris Candido was his friend who had died recently, and he did that spot in like IWA Mid-South and probably a lot of places. In fact, I think he might have done a spot. He did that spot in IWA Mid-South, I think in a match Punk was in, where he wrestled for like 2 or 3 minutes with his ass out.
Good call.
So having Candido having died a few months earlier, I bet you Punk probably thought, you know what, I'm going to work this into a match in the future. I'm going to wrestle with my ass hanging out. And he does not do it as long as Candido did, but he definitely wrestles for a while with his ass out. Yeah, just really, really, really enjoyable match. So, I'm just looking over something really quick. The other thing you mentioned, really, the crowd shot, which will be the picture of the show, because you mentioned that earlier. It should be, and it absolutely should be, where Punk is on the corner posing, and it's got this great camera shot where Joe is in the balcony, like right above him, and he's just looking down over Punk. And later in the match, we hear that like James Gibson and Foley have joined Joe on the second floor balcony. But there was one moment I liked where Punk during the match points to Joe in the balcony, and I think he says, "I built this place, not that fat son of a bitch." And you can hear some fans of the crowd be like, "Ooh, he called him fat." And I love that that's like the taboo thing here, like, and especially knowing that these two guys were like really good friends. The idea that I wonder if Joe was like, "You asshole," calling him fat.
Like if people weren't allowed to call Hulk Hogan bald back in the 80s.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like this unspoken secret everybody knows, like, oh man, he called him fat.
Brian Danielson does that even more blatantly in a promo in the next year or so. I vividly remember that.
Yeah. There will be a few people that call him fat, but it is kind of funny that most people up to this point did not call him fat, and Punk, who's his good friend, finally is at the point where he's just like, this fat son of a bitch, I built this place, not this guy. But after the match, Gabe, who has been, like you mentioned earlier, who has been on commentary for the last two matches, goes, what now? He's like, what do we do now? Because I guess we should mention Gabe has been hyping during this match that this was Punk's last show in Ring of Honor. And just like he kind of was for a while on the previous show, he keeps hyping, this is the last show for Punk. If doesn't happen here, he's running away with the title. Prazak says Punk leaves Ring of Honor with the title. Strong throws his hands up in disgust because, Punk just cheated to beat him, and he leaves the ring. He's just sickened by this. Punk celebrates on the outside of the ring. Green Lantern fan, you can hear him say, he's screaming at Punk to sign a picture at this moment, and Punk just ignores him. Punk grabs the mic and he tells the crowd to never doubt someone that is better than you. He says he'll be the only undefeated Ring of Honor champion in history. The belt belongs to him. He's leaving with it. Say goodbye to the champ. And at this point, James Gibson charges into the ring. Punk flees into the crowd. The crowd chants, "Run like a bitch" at Punk. Punk does, in fact, try to run like a bitch. He listens to the crowd. He tries to escape through the fans, but Samoa Joe is there in the back of the building, and he chases him back to the entranceway, where Mick Foley appears behind him. He strikes Punk with punches. Punk at this point, Foley and Joe throw Punk back into the ring. Gibson is in the ring. He tries to hit Punk with the Gibson driver, which is just the Tiger driver. Punk counters him, but Gibson is quickly able to hit him with it. He almost stumbles having him when he's doing it, but he hits him with it. He goes for a cover. Mick Foley makes an unofficial 3 count. Gibson grabs the Ring of Honor World title and poses with it. Some fans at this point, and they've been on Punk all night as a heel, but you can hear some fans in the crowd chant, "You're not the champion," at Gibson. And then Gibson grabs somebody and goes, "You're right. I'm not the champ, and I might not be the most deserving man for a title shot." Then at this point, he stands over Punk and he goes, "If you have any guts, you'll bring your ass to the Ring of Honor show next week and you'll wrestle James Gibson, the Redneck Messiah."
I think the reason for those "you're not the champ" chants, I'm just remembering being there. There were, again, a lot of us really thought at this point it was possible this really was Punk's last night. I think after this show, people realized, he's definitely staying until the Midwest. But, so they thought maybe, is ROH really going to do this to try to say that Punk lost the title? Mick Foley counts the random pin. So I think some people were just making sure, all right, you're not actually going to try to get away with this, are you? I think that was more what it was.
Yeah, I think some fans would. I think that, yeah. I mean, you were there, I wasn't, but I get the impression that if they tried just to do an impromptu Foley count win on one move, the fans would have shit on that. As much as they probably would have loved to have seen a title change.
Yes,
I don't think you guys would have accepted that.
I can verify that would not have been well taken.
But the Observer reaction to this, there's a little interesting things here. Dave wrote, CM Punk didn't lose the Ring of Honor title over the weekend as he beat Jay Lethal and Roderick Strong in matches that weren't announced ahead of time. He's back on the July 16th show in Woodbridge, Connecticut against James Gibson, which may be the title change, being that Gabe Sapolsky believes Gibson right now is as good as anyone in the business. It's not a lock as Punk has no start date in OVW or WWE right now, but those things change on a dime, and they are going to play this angle out as long as they can. So it is interesting that, Dave was completely fooled. I mean, everyone was. I mean, Wade Keller was too, that this weekend was going to be his last night. And you can see it's starting to evolve a little bit where Dave's like, well, maybe the next show will be his last one, but maybe not. So he's starting to get a little more hip to the nature of what this program's going to be. Although it is funny that he is right about James Gibson, just not on this show.
Yeah, I really do think that most of us who were following it closely figured it out at that point when they looked at the schedule. All right, maybe not everyone was positive it was going to be Gibson, but I think most people probably guessed that it was going to be, and that Punk would stick it out to the Chicago show because it was just a few shows away, and it's just now even Dave's reporting he doesn't have a start date. It's all right, I think it would be shocking if he didn't make it to the Chicago show. So I think, like you said, this weekend they fooled us. I think after this, the fooling part stops and people just kind of are along for the ride and enjoying the storyline.
Especially if you watch both shows this week and if you were there live, or just read the reports, it's clear Ring of Honor is teasing a Daniels match, a Gibson match, and some kind of match with Samoa Joe. And so it'd be really weird if you left it would be weird if they teased 3 matches and only did one of them, Right. So I think at that point, once they've started to tease a few matches, I think he has to be around at least long enough to pay off those matches, which is exactly how long he is around for. So
exactly.
The Observer, they also wrote in The Observer, Meltzer said, Foley ended the show cutting a promo, including making hilarious references to Punk and OVW. He put over the Ring of Honor wrestlers, saying that almost everything he saw on the card he couldn't do, except what Homicide did by using a fork. So this is a promo he must have did after the show. We do not get to see this, but it must have been like a Foley send the crowd home happy type thing. But
I got to see it. Ha 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 ha.
Were there hilarious references to Punk and OVW, Matt?
There were references. I mean, was there how funny can it? Like even if you tell the funniest joke about that, how funny can it be, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so we go backstage where Gabe is chasing Colt Cabana around with a camera. He wants that promo from him. Colt is mad. He's annoyed that people are hounding him, asking about Punk and his problems. Colt is sorry if Punk is doing drastic stuff right now, but he has nothing to do with that stuff. Colt says he has his own problems. He thought he could beat Nigel tonight at his own game. He announces he's off to England. He has a lot to learn, and he walks away as the camera zooms in on an exit sign on the wall. And again, like we mentioned earlier, this is actually, even though it's part storyline, Colt is gone for the next 2 shows. He is in England and Germany for the next month. So again, I love that kind of stuff, that they're working in real stuff into the storyline.
Yeah, I mean, they ended the match with the hottest match of the night. Call them back to it because everyone loved that match so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it's good that they figured out a storyline reason to explain Cabana's loss, and they also do a good job of capitalizing on it when he comes back.
Yeah, and that's something Gabe would often do, where it's like, if a guy did lose, he would often try and find a way to reframe it as like, this is just the start of his comeback. So, yeah, exactly. It's like, yes, he lost, but it's okay because he's going to come back having learned even more stuff, and he's going to be a better version of himself and all that kind of stuff. But, Matt, that brings us to the end of the show. Second half of this double shot, very hot crowd. A lot of stuff going on that we've talked about. Well, how's it all add up? What did you think about the show as a whole?
Well, before I talk about the whole, I do want to say one thing about the Punk storyline, because obviously I love it, but they really put a lot of care into figuring out how to get Punk to come from Long Island back to New York. They did not put as much care in getting him to come back to Connecticut, because with that, Foley was like, you better come tomorrow or else, Vince McMahon's going to be mad. Whereas this time it's Gibson's just like, if you don't come to Connecticut, you don't have any guts. And it's just like, all right, that's easy. But I guess you could argue like the Vince thing is like a standing thing. Like Punk can't leave with the title. He has to do business. As stupid as that is, like, conceptually knowing Vince, it works, I guess, for the storyline.
But you are right, because even the next show, they will end that match with a very big cliffhanger to give you a good storyline reason why Punk should come back for the next show. And this is the one show in this string where, yeah, you're right, they don't really have if Punk really wanted to screw the fans over, there's no reason for him, unless, like you said, you just extrapolate what was on the last show, that Vince McMahon will be so pissed if Punk doesn't keep defending the title. But
right. As far as the show itself, so this was a big deal show for me, like just personally. Like this is the show that got me hooked in ROH, like especially that Lethal Homicide match. But the whole vibe in that building was so amazing. And at this point, I was just gonna go. Like, I had only been to shows in New York. Since May, this was their 5th show in the state of New York in 2 months. Basically, I think less than 2 months, actually. Their 5th show in the state of New York. And I think they're not coming back for a couple months after this, finally. But so the fact that the crowd was as hot as it was really impressive. And this was a huge, big deal show. That said, I don't think it holds up quite as well on DVD as the live experience was. There are shows that do. So it's not like it's always better live. Like, I mean, it is maybe usually better live, but it's not always as much better live as it was for this one for me. Like, I guess I think this was a good show. There was some stuff that I didn't think was so great. I definitely didn't really like the four-way that much. I unfortunately did not feel the way you felt about the European rounds match. And I think that it doesn't feel as memorable in comparison to the last show we reviewed, Sign of Dishonor, just because Punk's performance on that show was so legendary. Like, just as a one-night performance. You know, he was great on this show, but, like, on that show, it was just like, oh my God, you have to see CM Punk on this show. And I don't think this was that, because, you know, he didn't get the promo time or the angles or, you know, telling the story. And, you know, like I said, I liked his match the night before slightly better. This was still a really good show in terms of, like, good stuff, but I don't think I would have it in the top tier of shows from 2005 at this point. I think maybe it's like one level below that. So a good show, but I don't think it was a great show.
See, I do kind of think this is a great show. I like the show more than you, and obviously probably me thinking one match was great that everyone else thought was one of the worst matches on the show probably really explains a lot of that swing. But, you know, I think the crowd was a special crowd that really added to my enjoyment of the whole show. I think other than the four-way, which isn't far from it, I think everything on the show was at least 3 stars, like at least good. And even the four-way had its moments, but it was overall a little below that. But still, and there was a lot of stuff that's really enjoyable. Even if the Aries Joe match wasn't quite on the level of their other matches, a bad Aries Joe match is still pretty damn good. Really liked Punk Strong. Really liked obviously Nigel Colt. Homicide Lethal is just a spectacle to see on so many levels. But where I will agree with you, it's weird. Like, I think as a wrestling show, I really enjoyed the show a lot, but it is the first show in like the Summer of Punk storyline. If we consider it now 3 shows old, like, I completely agree. This show does not feel special the way the last 2 shows did, because obviously Death Before Dishonor feels special because of the title change and people thought it was Punk's last match and the turn. And then the show, Sign of Dishonor felt special because it was kind of a different format wise. And it was the first time, we don't know who Punk's facing. And you had the long promo to start with and all this stuff. And this show, it does just feel more like it's just a middle chapter. It's just kind of getting from point A to point C. And it's not really, like we even mentioned earlier about how even Punk's promo on this show is not as substantial as the promos on the last 2 shows. And so in that sense, I would say from a storyline point, it's not as good as the last 2 shows, but I just think a work factor, you and the crowd did a really great job there. Give yourselves a pat on the back. I thought
and Punk did not express disgust for me like I thought he did.
Exactly. Although, to be fair, I also thought you were hard on yourself there, Matt, because, let's face it, on the list of things to assume, a wrestling fan assuming that Punk gave them a dirty look at some point is probably a pretty safe assumption. You know what? If he didn't do it on this show, he probably would have done it on another show, Matt.
That's true. Although, in my head, it was not like him being a heel. It was like a genuine, this man is disgusted by me.
Again, a safe assumption.
Yeah, definitely. He would absolutely be disgusted by me if he saw me. That's a fact. As would all of you.
You are a handsome, charming man. You are in the top, I would say 5% of any wrestling crowd you are in. But I like that. Gets a laugh. With that being said, time for plugs. If you want to get in contact with that charming man or this not as charming man, through the years at gmail.com, THROH, or our Twitters at Trevor Dame or at Mayor MGF. We have a thread on the Pro Wrestling Only plug section. A fan recently wrote a long, very insightful post giving their thoughts on the show, and I made a reply. So, hey, you want to read public feedback like that? Get some extra thoughts from me. It's up there on a post on the Pro Wrestling Only forum plug section. Next time on the show, we will be covering Fate of an Angel, the middle chapter of the 7-show stretch of the Summer of Punk. Matt Hardy finally comes to Ring of Honor to wrestle Christopher Daniels. Samoa Joe defends the pure title against Jimmy Rave. And the main event, we got a big world title match. James Gibson versus CM Punk for for the world title.
And we finally get Joe Gagne back. I am so happy that
oh my God,
our Podfather is back on the show.
Oh God,
I'm happy about it.
Okay, well, I will, even with that sword of Damocles hovering over my head, we will try to have a good time. And until next time, have a great time.